Chapter 219. As a master, it was necessary to always solve problems for the disciple. When Wang Lu encountered difficulties, she was able to stand up for him at the first time. Wang Wu's sense of service was certainly commendable, but at the same time she showed overestimation of one's capabilities and even shamelessness, which made people unable to praise her. In the face of his master who had stuck out her chest to show her confidence, Wang Lu was silent for a while, and even subconsciously loosened his arm that was wrapped around Bai Shishuan's waist. Master, to put it bluntly, you're coveting Shishuan's immortal beast origin, right? After a moment of thought, Wang Lu exposed the truth. I remember when you appeared, your first sentence was my non-phase peak's immortal beast? When did Bai Shishuan become the non-phase peak's property? Wang Wu's countenance remained unchanged. Look at what you're saying. As a master, how could I covet my disciple's thing? Even if you squander a huge sum of money to buy a luxurious flying boat, I won't be jealous. Master, you've confessed without being pressed. That's not the point. I'm thinking for you, okay? You're a non-phase peak disciple, and Bai Shishuan is your sister, so what's wrong with saying that she's a non-phase peak's person? Not to mention you're my non-phase peak successor disciple, just like the sun in the morning, everything on the non-phase peak is yours. Wang Lu sneered. Those local tyrants who lie to a little girl and say that sooner or later, they'll help her up the ladder, they also have the same face. You and I have been master and disciple for 10 years, but unexpectedly, we can't exchange for basic trust, which really makes me grieved. If I believe you, I'll be the one grieving for my own IQ. The master and disciple quarreled incessantly, ignoring the other people around them. However, Shaoqi, Lu Li, and the others were just watching with interest. No one interrupted them, they just silently watched the lively scene and then whispered a few words to each other. However, Bai Shishuan, who stood next to Wang Lu, had her eyes glued to Wang Wu for a long time, unable to move away. Unexpectedly, she seemed to be obsessed. A moment later, Wang Wu became aware of Bai Shishuan's gaze, and couldn't help but feel happy. She flaunted to Wang Lu, "Look, while you're slandering Master Shishuan's eyes are like a torch. She has already seen my unique charm, and has secretly fallen in love with me." Wang Lu sneered, "I think he's just trying to find moral integrity from you, but he can't find it, so he's lost." Wang Wu sneered, "The wailing of a stray dog is really unpleasant to hear. But don't worry, I will remember to send you an invitation for my wedding with Shishuan. You should also remember to bring some money." Wang Lu sneered, "Don't worry, I will bring out 9 copper coins to make you kneel and lick my feet." Wang Wu sneered, "At that time I will have an immortal beast, why would I care about your 9 copper coins? Don't think I'll be poor forever." Finished speaking, she no longer entangled herself in the verbal battle with Wang Lu, walked in front of Bai Shishuan, and blossomed with an unprecedented gentle smile, "Little sister Shishuan, do you want to accompany big sister to see the koi fish?" Because she knew that the other party was just a little girl who had just gained spiritual wisdom, and was as pure as a piece of white paper, Wang Wu casually struck up a conversation with her. But the next moment, Bai Shishuan's reaction was far beyond her expectations. 2 clear lines of tears streaked across the girl's cheeks. Wang Wu was immediately shocked. Are you crying tears of joy?" Bai Shishuan's tears flowed like a spring, but she remained silent. Wang Lu said in surprise, "Master, look at you, your moral integrity is too low, causing you to look repulsive. You scared me to tears." Regarding Bai Shishuan's tears, different people have different interpretations, but the next moment the girl revealed the answer herself. She gently stretched out her hand and touched Wang Wu's face. "Doesn't it hurt?" Wang Wu was baffled, thinking, "What does it hurt?" However, the cool touch on her face suddenly had a penetrating power, penetrating through her skin and into the depths of her heart, touching the darkness that had not been touched for many years. Great waves suddenly appeared in Wang Wu's heart. The girl's body trembled, and then she incredulously looked at Bai Shishuan, whose face was filled with sorrow and tears. She wanted to say something but inexplicably choked with sobs, unable to speak. A subtle emotion silently surged between the two. Wang Wu and Bai Shishuan stared at each other as if petrified. Bai Shishuan's tears continued to flow, and Wang Wu was gradually infected, her body slightly trembling. Okay, if you two want to be affectionate with me, don't do it in front of me, your good friend, okay?" Shaoqi timely interjected. He reached out and gently patted the two's head, immediately interrupting the emotional transmission. Wang Wu recovered the fastest. She forcefully blinked her eyes and smiled, "I'm sorry, my period just came." Then she took a few steps back and didn't say a word. Obviously, it was difficult for her to calm down, and she wasn't as relaxed as she appeared. Bai Shixian was stunned for a long time, then she let out an sound and blankly shook her head. What's wrong with me? Wang Wu and Xiao Qi looked at her at the same time, and then looked at each other, sighing with emotion at the magical power of immortal beasts. Xiao Qi transmitted his voice through his primordial spirit. How does it feel to have one's heart pointed out, my friend? Wang Wu sighed. As a woman, I've never felt such a strong and powerful penetration. Xiao Qi exclaimed, you recover really fast, just 2 sentences and you've already revealed your true colors. Wang Wu said, humph, it's not a big deal. After so many years, it's fine if it's occasionally turned over and sighed with emotion. Do you want to be entangled for a long time? However, this little girl's magical power is really far beyond my expectation. You should know how my non-phase immortal heart is. In recent years it has been strengthened several times, but it still can't resist her gentle touch. Immortal beasts are indeed immortal beasts, their magical power is not like that of the human world. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth Beast Master School to go through so much trouble for her. Although she has passed the form transformation tribulation, she's still a baby, and it would take at least thousands of years for her to reach maturity. After thousands of years, the cultivators of today have long become dust, and it's unknown whether Beast Master School can continue to exist. Even so, they still yearn for Bai Shixian, which shows her value. Moreover, now it seems that Beast Master School has underestimated her a bit. After all, before this, there hasn't been a genuine immortal beast in 9 regions for a long time. Wang Wu shook her head. Haven't seen for a long time? Not necessarily. Just being by that kid Wang Lu's side is already. This guy's providence is so strong that it's amazing. Xiao Qi also agreed. Yes, Wang Lu's ability to involve cause and effect has never been seen before. I can almost see the whirlpool of cause and effect with my naked eyes. I think even immortal Qin and great ancestor Dishing are no better than this. Wang Wu said with a smile, you think too highly of him. It's nothing more than his ability to stir up trouble. This kind of person, although he will have many fortuitous encounters and his cultivation base will advance by leaps and bounds contrary to common sense, the probability of him dying prematurely is also very high. The outstanding tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind, and the geniuses who have fallen in these years are actually, speaking to this, she seemed to have stirred up a strange emotion and could not help but shut her mouth. Xiao Qi also avoided this topic and said, that's why you specifically asked me to take care of him, and later on because you were worried you personally came over. Wang Wu smiled and said nothing. But I'm a little curious. You asked him to come to Cloud Region under the pretext of delivering a letter. Did you already expect this experience? How can I be so far-sighted? If I really have this ability, I would have already looked for immortal fate all over the world. Wang Wu said and shook her head with some annoyance. It's just some old fool who thinks he's smart. Oh? Then he's really kind to give such a big opportunity to Wang Lu. I heard that he himself also has a successor disciple. Wang Wu said, Grand Cloud Mountain is like pulling a tooth from a tiger's mouth. To deal with a high-rank sect, Wang Lu has done so many things, but in the end I still have to come forward to clean up the mess. If it was Zhu Shiyao, she would have been killed long ago. However, that old thing did not treat his disciple badly. The immortal fate that he left for Zhu Shiyao is not inferior to that of Wang Lu. A month later, in the Southern Heaven region, there will be a high-rank spiritual treasure-level ancient sword, and Zhu Shiyao has already booked it. Xiao Qi was surprised. Southern Heaven region high-rank spiritual treasure? Let a junior disciple fight for it? The place where it will appear is the ancient sword tomb. Opportunity is more important than cultivation base, and when it comes to sword fate, no one in the entire Spirit Sword Mountain can compare to Zhu Shiyao. As long as she doesn't court death, it's inevitable that she will be able to snatch the treasure. Not to mention that not long ago she has just killed a spirit beast whose cultivation base is close to Yuanying stage, so her sword power is at its peak. Even some senior cultivators, if they take her lightly, would suffer a big loss. After talking about Zhu Shiyao, Wang Wu said, since this matter is over, I'm ready to bring people back to the mountain. Do you want to go to the Spirit Sword Mountain with me for a couple of days? Xiao Qi shook his head. Forget it, I have my own experiential learning in the Grand Cloud platform. This time, I've accompanied this child Wang Lu to experience some things, and I'm one step closer to the deity stage. I have to seriously prepare for it. Remember to call me when the divine tribulation comes. Hey, forget it. If I call you, I'm afraid I'll become the most useless cultivator among the deity stage cultivators. If you have the heart, just help me burn some incense and pray for me. I pray that you fail to reach deity stage and become disheartened, so that I can take advantage of the situation and put you in my bowl forever. Get lost. I'm leaving, remember to think of me when you're free. Get lost. After bidding farewell to Shaoqi, the people of Nanfei's Peak boarded Wang Lu's Cloud Wave boat and left the Grand Cloud Mountain. Sitting in the flying boat, looking at the waterfall-like scenery of the Grand Cloud Mountain outside the window, Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This trip to the Grand Cloud region was not long, less than a month in total. However, the story was rich and colorful, full of twists and turns. No, it was simply 3,000 twists and turns. At this time, when he slowly recalled it in his mind, he couldn't help but feel tired and powerless. However, looking at Bai Shixian, who was happily chatting with Lu Li and the cat girl Ling Yan on the side, no matter how hard it was worth it. Before long, the Cloud Wave boat pierced through the clouds. The landscape of the Grand Cloud Mountain was hidden behind a layer of mist. Wang Lu retracted his gaze and inwardly sighed. Oh Grand Cloud Mountain, I haven't let you down for the time being. Although Shixian has just transformed and has to leave her hometown, it's still much better than being enslaved. Moreover, Spirit Sword Mountain is also a blessed place, so Bai Shixian should be able to live happily. So please rest assured. Wang Lu lowered his head and clenched a round white stone in his hand. It was an inconspicuous pebble from the Green Lake, but it was an important souvenir of Wang Lu's experiential learning. Chapter 220. From Cloud Region back to Spirit Sword Mountain, it was a safe journey. After returning to the mountain, their life was also peaceful and comfortable, and there were no more changes. Previously, when Wang Lu made the pledge to marry Bai Shixian, he clearly felt a few inexplicable chills behind his back. However, after that, there was no follow-up, as if everything was just an illusion. After returning to the mountain, the experiential learning team was naturally disbanded. Lu Li returned to the Brilliant Peak and reported the experiential learning to her master Zhou Ming. Bai Shixian and the cat girl Ling Yan, led by Wang Wu, went to visit the sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect, and then very smoothly obtained the sword mark of Lingjian School. From then on, they were officially members of Spirit Sword Sect. Moreover, all of their treatment was similar to that of Taoist Master King Pil, completely without any discrimination because of their spirit beast origin. Some sects would not talk about the equality of all living beings, because true equality never needed to be talked about. Quan Zihua was still full of foolishness, living a carefree life. This experiential learning with Wang Lu was not that bright, but after carefully combing through the development of events, it was not difficult to find out that everything was actually because of it. However, it was hard to say how much of it was the will of heaven and how much of it was the will of man. As for Wang Lu himself, after a long time, he enjoyed the medicinal bath personally prepared by his master, as well as the blood circulation technique personally performed by his master. His whole body seemed to have been reborn. Of course, he had no other choice. Previously, because of the pressure from Xiao Bo, Wang Lu had to sacrifice his means of retreat and sacrifice the immature innate non-phase diamond sword. That sword strike certainly made his swordsmanship a step further, but the price was also quite heavy, and the burden on his body was far beyond the limit. After that sword strike, Wang Lu immediately restrained his magical power and suppressed his body. However, the damage had actually been done. At that time, the exhaustion he felt was just an appearance. What was hidden underneath was a deep hidden danger. Fortunately, his master was there. With a medicinal bath and a blood circulation technique, most of the hidden danger in Wang Lu's body was eliminated. As for the remaining part, with the natural healing ability of non-phase sword bone, it would not take long for the injury to completely recover. The problem that was worth paying attention to was not these. If you were to evaluate it yourself, how many points would you give yourself in this experiential learning? After the massage, while wiping her hands with a towel, Wang Wu asked Wang Lu, who was lying on the bed with his upper body bare. At this time, Wang Lu's blood vessels were relaxed, and he was in a state of ecstasy. His voice carried a sense of enjoyment and laziness. Of course it's 100 points. Wang Wu spat, I really should have rubbed your face a little more just now. 100 points? How dare you say that? Wang Lu added unhurriedly, a full score of 200. In the end, even you, master, were alarmed. How could I have the nerve to give myself a full score? Wang Wu said, it's good that you know. If I didn't save you, you would have been played to death by the elders of the beast-taming school. Speaking of the dangerous situation at that time, Wang Lu sighed with emotion. It's not easy to pull a tooth out of a tiger's mouth. His master sighed with emotion. Pulling a tooth out of a tiger's mouth is indeed not easy, but in fact, with your ability, it's not difficult at all. But you, relying on your superiority as a professional adventurer, didn't explain. Not only did you want to pull a tooth out of a tiger, you also wanted to make it explode. This is a typical case of if you don't seek death, you won't die. Think about it yourself. If you were a little more low-key when you first arrived in Yunzhou and took the initiative to avoid a direct conflict with the beast taming school, wouldn't the later development be a lot smoother? Wang Lu sighed and didn't say much. First, he was tired and lazy and had no strength to refute. Second, his master pointed straight to the point and was not wrong. If from the very beginning he didn't care about the offense of the two junior disciples of the beast taming school and always hid in the dark, the later development would not have been so twists and turns. With Wang Lu's methods, he could have laid out a plan while the enemy was in the light and he was in the dark. He could have taken away the immortal beasts without alarming anyone. As a result, the actual operation was just brute force. The tactic was exquisite, but the strategy was somewhat suicidal. Of course, you can also shirk it by saying that it's to earn reputation points. But in the end it's more about face. The lead disciple of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the Wisdom sect leader, none of these titles allow you to be low-key. Therefore, even though you know that your cultivation is not enough, you still insist on going against the heaven's will, dancing on the tip of a knife. Fortunately, the final result is not bad. It really let you go through more than half of the road of going against the heaven. If not for Bai Shirshen falling in love with you, even if I came forward, I wouldn't be able to take her back. So, for the time being, I'll give you a passing score. In short, although this experiential learning is not long, there are a lot of things that are worth summarizing. In the next 2 days, while you're recuperating and can't cultivate, write a report for me. Wang Lu almost jumped out of bed. Write what report? The report about the experiential learning on the Grand Cloud Mountain in the Cloud region, mainly from the experiential learning background, team composition, experiential learning process, experience and other aspects. Not only should it reflect the results, but it also needs to check the problems, including the problems in your immortal cultivation and immortal cultivation style. It needs to be thoroughly analyzed and come up with a practical solution. Do I have to take a bath to treat my illness? It hasn't been long since I came down from the mountain. When did this kind of unhealthy trend start to blow up on the mountain? His Excellency Master expressionlessly said, in addition to writing the report, I believe that in a few days, the Beast Master School's letter of protest will be sent to the Wanxian League headquarters. Although in general we won't have too much trouble, this war of words is inevitable. At that time, you will be responsible for the exchange of documents and wrangling with the Beast Master School. Moreover, since this time, because of an immortal opportunity, you directly advanced to the Shudan stage, including the non-phase sword bone, non-phase sword, and other series of methods, you must prepare for the next stage of cultivation. I have drafted a cultivation plan for you. When you're done with the written work, you can start to implement it. The intensity is not too high, you only need to cultivate for 24 hours a day. Well, that's all for the time being. If there's something else, I will inform you in time. With that, his master ignored Wang Lu's astonishment and stepped out of the door. After walking out of the cabin, the woman looked back at the lazily lying Wang Lu and smiled quite contentedly. Thank me for being gentle and considerate, you stupid disciple who makes people worry. If I don't use these methods to make you as busy as a dog, you, this lovelorn teenager, always let your imagination run wild, and you will definitely come up with some kind of wicked idea. In Yunzhou you harmed the Beast Master School, but now that you've returned to the non-phase peak, don't come and harm me. At the same time, Wang Lu's subtle youthful mood also made the woman quite disdainful. Obviously he had already set foot on the road of immortal cultivation for more than 10 years, during which he even developed a large-scale sect with a venerable status, but unexpectedly he was still troubled by some love affair. Let's be clear, you're the lead disciple of the #1 sword sect in the Wanxian League. You obviously have a supreme weapon that can cut off all kinds of troubles. Big magic sword. It was rare for the non-phase peak's fifth elder to think gently and considerately for once. Unfortunately, things that she was not good at were not good at. She tried to use overtime to mediate Wang Lu's mood, but unexpectedly, the first step of her plan was wrong. Because writing this kind of pain-in-the-ass report absolutely could not relieve people's loneliness. Although in the fifth elder's opinion, spending one's energy to write this kind of pain-in-the-ass report would certainly make people restless, to the extent that they would scratch their head and scratch their ears, making it impossible for them to concentrate and thus distract their mind. However, at this time Wang Lu's mental state was precisely in the state of, I can do this kind of pain-in-the-ass thing for you to see. Since his master had requested it, and his injury had yet to heal, he had nothing better to do. Thus he simply put his energy into drafting this pain-in-the-ass report. Although in the eyes of many people, This kind of pain in the ass article was neither gorgeous nor practical, and could be called as a typical waste of pen and ink, but in fact, an excellent pain in the ass article required the writer to have a high degree of clear-headedness. Every word and sentence must be precise and concise. Although it didn't have the excessive elaboration of parallel prose, the content and logic requirements were higher. Especially when drafting the summary report, it was necessary to have a very clear understanding of the whole thing. Therefore, the moment Wang Lu picked up the pen, he was deeply immersed in his memory, unable to extricate himself. Every scene that he experienced in the past few days in Cloud Region was incomparably clearly replayed in his mind. Spirit Sword Sect's top student's retentive memory was brought into full play, including when he first entered Cloud Region, when he encountered the dog lover cultivator of Beastmaster School, when he was eager to fight with Chi-Ho, and the unforgettable ripples in the Green Lake. For this indescribable subtle emotion that arose in his heart, Wang Lu could only sigh endlessly. However, he was stronger than his master expected. After feeling melancholy for a while, he recovered the rationality that a professional adventurer should have. There were some things that didn't need to be deliberately ignored and forgotten, but also didn't need to be deliberately entangled. Compared to 5 years ago when he bid farewell to his parents in the Wang family village, it didn't need more willpower to wield a big magic sword to cut off his worries. Let alone this matter was just a momentary sigh, perhaps it was probably not to the point of falling out of love. However, since he had picked up the pen, he still had to seriously write this report. It was just that, with a special emotion, the style of this report was particularly different. This time, the keynote of this report was mainly about reflection. During the experiential learning, he laid out the layout and design, as well as the brilliant example of defeating a powerful enemy several levels higher than him, were skipped in just a few words. Instead, he spent a great deal of effort in analyzing his mistakes. Wang Lu seriously reflected on his words and deeds during the experiential learning, listing all the imperfections and places that needed to be improved. That list was so detailed that it was enough to make people's hair stand on end. Wang Lu even marked out every moment that he was occasionally distracted while walking on the Grand Cloud Mountain, which was simply harsh to the point that he couldn't concentrate on his cultivation. However, in this way Wang Lu had a new understanding of this experiential learning. The feeling could only be understood, but it was hard to describe. 2 days later, the fully healed Wang Lu put down the last stroke in front of his bed. Putting down the pen that was full of ink, he glanced at the experiential learning report with tens of thousands of words and sighed. With a rub of his finger, he ignited the Samadhi True Fire. In the firelight, the sharpness that belonged to a professional adventurer gradually returned. However, just as he stood up and waved his hand to welcome his new life, the wooden house was kicked open with a bang. His master rushed in, flustered and exasperated. "Stinking brat, you want to burn yourself after falling out of love?" Chapter 221. The troubles of young Wang Lu, after all, did not develop into any major disaster. The lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, who brandished his big sword to cut off his worries, soon recovered the sharpness of a professional adventurer. However, it was not difficult for people close to him to find that Wang Lu's mood was actually more or less affected. In the first few days after his injury was healed, his whole body exuded a strong aggressiveness, like a male elephant in heat, which might retaliate against the society at any time. Fortunately, in those days the protest letter sent by Beastmaster School to the Wanxian League was copied to Lingjian School. Sect leader Feng Yin Daoist Master casually approved it to Non-Phase Peak, and the Master of Non-Phase Peak of course handed it over to Wang Lu to deal with, providing him with a good target. Beastmaster School's protest letter was almost the same as Wang Wu's initial expectation. It was nothing more than criticizing Lingjian School's hegemonism, illegally seizing the young immortal beast, killing and injuring Beastmaster School cultivators, which had a bad influence and must be severely punished, and so on. Although from the point of view of Beastmaster School, this was indeed the case. In fact, in the eyes of the Wanxian League, this protest letter really had no weight. Similar sects disputes happened all the time, and the subsequent development was nothing more than a war of words. According to the general practice, Lingjian School, as the party who got substantial benefits, would most likely issue a few announcements to appease the mood of Beastmaster School, and then explain and state the more intense issues in the protest letter. After a few rounds of repeated entanglement, the banners and drums of war gradually subsided. However, at that time Wang Lu was in a period of strong desire to attack. After reading the protest letter, he sneered 3 times and said in a clear voice, "The whole thing is bullshit." Then he buried himself in the desk and wrote a rebuttal article. Different from the practice of the Wanxian League, Wang Lu's article was like a sharp sword mountain, full of aggression. Not only did it not mean to ease the contradiction, but it also made the problem more intense. For example, the Beastmaster School strongly protested about the non-phase peak master and disciple committing all kinds of crimes in the Beastmaster School's territory. Wang Lu clearly stated his position at the very beginning. Who the fuck admits that it's your family's territory? According to the strict regulations of the Wanxian League, the jurisdiction of the Beastmaster School over the Grand Cloud Mountain was not clear. The relevant procedures were also incomplete. Declaring the Grand Cloud Mountain as the territory of the Beastmaster School was unjustifiable. Compared to Wang Lu, who was recognized by the spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain, the cultivators of the Beastmaster School were more like uninvited guests. What's even more shocking is that Wang Lu found a record from an unknown dusty historical book. 8,000 years ago, there was a predecessor of the Lingjian School who went to the Grand Cloud Mountain to cultivate in seclusion using the spiritual power of the earth vein. Thereupon he simply wrote, "Since ancient times the Grand Cloud Mountain has been an inseparable part of my Lingjian School." Another example, in their letter of protest, the Beastmaster School claimed that even if they didn't consider the territory issue, the capture of the young immortal beasts on the Grand Cloud Mountain was a strategic work that Beastmaster School had been planning for many years and had invested a large amount of manpower and material resources. It was completely an internal affair of the Beastmaster School. And according to the previous investment, Beastmaster School ought to have the priority to own the immortal beasts on the Grand Cloud Mountain. Wang Lu and the others interfered, stealing the fruits of the Beastmaster School's work, rudely interfering with the internal affairs of the Beastmaster School, and violating the sovereignty of the Beastmaster School. Regarding this, Wang Lu vehemently accused the Beastmaster School of adopting a series of extremely irresponsible and cruel acts towards the spirit beasts on the Grand Cloud Mountain, including the 10,000 Spirit Chi Gathering Array and the 10,000 Spirit Lock Termination Array, which were utterly heartless and contrary to human nature. They were completely contrary to the concept of equality between humans and beasts that Beastmaster School had always proclaimed, and could be called the disgrace of the righteous path of the Wanxian League. As for the reason why Wang Lu and the others interfered, of course it was because they saw injustice and drew their swords to help. As for whether or not this constituted a violation of the sovereignty of other sects, as everyone knew, human rights were higher than sovereignty, and this was a universal value that was universally recognized by the Wanxian League. Wang Lu and the others were nothing more than actively spreading the radiance of human nature, and planting the universal flower. The former spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain had secretly given her heart to Wang Lu, and the current spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain, by Shixian, had privately pledged to marry him. This was enough to prove that the righteous act of Wang Lu and the others was the aspiration of the people, and the general trend of democracy was vast and mighty. If the Beastmaster School stubbornly refused to change their ways, they would inevitably become the old scammers that died under the wheel of history. Such an article full of offensive nature, Wang Lu wrote it in one go. Conveniently stamping his master's seal on it, he handed it over to the person in charge of the Spirit Pool Peak, ready to send it to the Wanxian League as a reply. As a result, when the several senior brothers of the Spirit Pool Peak opened the article and read it, they immediately jumped up in fright. They hurriedly submitted the article to the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall for review. At that time, Elder Lu Li, who was in charge of foreign affairs at that time, also had his complexion changed after reading it, and then directly approved it to the sect leader. Feng Yin Taoist master had always been partial to the non-phase peak, and was also quite indulgent. However, after reading Wang Lu's article, he also sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Could it be that this child Wang Lu has fallen out of love? Although he was surprised, Feng Yin Taoist master pondered for a moment, and then called several disciples of the Spirit Pool Peak. After slightly polishing the text, he actually really published the article. For a time, it stirred up 1,000 layers of waves in the Wanxian League, and the Beastmaster School's protest letter was even more continuous. However, although the clamor in the Wanxian League was unusually enthusiastic, the actual temperature of the matter had obviously dropped. In addition to the protest letter, the Beastmaster School didn't take any further action. In fact, they couldn't come up with any effective method. Lingjian School resided in the Blue River region and had very little communication with the outside world. Once they closed their doors and turned a blind eye to the protests of the outside world, even the other 5 uniques would feel like a rabbit pulling a turtle. And this was also the helplessness faced by the common sects in the face of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. When the other side made it clear that they didn't want to talk more with you, no matter how much you talked, it would be useless. Not to mention that although Wang Lu's article was fierce, the several core points were very stable. Although the Beastmaster School refuted it a lot, in fact it was very powerless. Of course, as a hot topic, the aftermath still shook for a long time, making the idlers in the Wanxian League excited for a long time. But all of this had nothing to do with the main culprit, Wang Lu. After using an article to vent the anger in his heart, he returned to his normal pace of life, like a noble child abandoning a pregnant girl, throwing the war of words to the back of his mind. Then he directly went to the head Feng Yin Taoist master and asked for the settlement of the reputation points. If it weren't for Wang Lu's words, even Feng Yin Taoist master himself would have almost forgotten that Wang Lu's previous trip to the north to Yunzhou had an important purpose, which was to earn the school's reputation points in order to unlock the title and then obtain the spirit treasure. The reputation point system was originally designed by Lingjian School to encourage the disciples to actively win glory for the school. But at this time, compared to Wang Lu's actions in Yunzhou, the reputation point system really seemed insignificant. Even the immortal beast had been brought back and you still care about the reputation points? But since Wang Lu asked for the settlement, there was no harm in letting it go. The head immortal counted with his fingers and couldn't help but smile. If calculated in terms of the reputation points, Wang Lu worked hard in Yunzhou and earned a lot of points, but in fact, it was far less than his impassioned article later, which put Lingjian School at the forefront of the Wanxian League for a while, and he, Wang Lu, established the initial reputation in the entire Wanxian League, so the amount of points that could be settled could be said to be huge. The head immortal smiled and said, "Considering your actions, the way to obtain the reputation points, and according to the rules and regulations promulgated by the school, I have decided to grant you the title of Democracy Fighter." "Sorry, I don't want this title anymore." Titles and the like, Wang Lu already regarded them as floating clouds, and the tailor-made spiritual treasure was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Coupled with his mood, this matter was completely put to the back of his mind. The experiential learning in Yunzhou allowed Wang Lu to increase his cultivation base by several years in just a few days, directly entering the Shudan stage from the foundation establishment stage. While it was gratifying, it also brought a little pressure to Wang Lu's cultivation base. The rapid growth of his magical power cultivation base made his swordsmanship, body, immortal heart, and other methods somewhat lag behind. Although it did not cause any harm, he still needed to make up for the progress as soon as possible. After entering the Shudan stage, the magical ability of a cultivator would be greatly expanded. Although non-phase method was a very plain method, there were still many tricks that could be played. In particular, after Wang Lu saw his master's jaw-dropping innate non-phase wealth protection sword Qi, he felt that there was still a long way to go in the road of cultivation. In accordance with his master's cultivation plan, Wang Lu's life was regular and substantial. Of course, it was not to the extent that he lived a 24-hour day without rest. In addition to cultivation, his life was very colorful. For example, in order to improve his diet on the first day after his injury healed, he went down the mountain to visit the lady boss of the Spirit Creek town. The two sides warmly greeted each other. "Yo, lady boss, good morning." "Yo, pervert, good morning. I heard that this time, you went down the mountain and privately promised to marry a dog." "Haha, I can't believe that you usually eat dog meat, but in essence you're actually a pervert who loves dogs. Moreover, I heard that you have a true love in your heart, but these days you've been lovelorn on the mountain? Haha, young people are really troubled. Come, eat this plate of stir-fried celery to calm down." Therefore, after recovering from his injury, Wang Lu received the main task of tracking down the real culprit of the gossip. Unexpectedly, when he was in closed-door training for 2 days in non-phase peak, such vicious rumors actually spread outside. "Who told me this?" The indifferent lady boss, while wiping the plate, said without lifting her head, "Of course, it's Wang Wu. 2 days ago, I asked her to settle the credit for these years, but she couldn't come up with the money, so she said that she wanted to use an incomparably explosive gossip to pay off the debt, and then I realized that you, master and disciple, are really perverted and have no lower limit." Hey, you believe the nonsense of Wang Wu?" The lady boss snorted. "If it's just empty talk, I naturally don't believe it, but it's not like I haven't seen Bai Shixian in person. Humph, when she mentioned you, the little girl's face was overflowing with love. I'm not a fool, can't I see that there's something fishy between you two? What the now is the 7th month, the weather is dry, the immortal beast in heat, what does it have to do with me? Yes, who knows what kind of magical ability you used to make the immortal beast in heat." In short, in order to dispel the lady boss misunderstanding, Wang Lu's life suddenly became colorful. Chapter 222. The experiential learning in the Grand Cloud region was not long, but it brought Wang Lu an exceptionally rich harvest. His cultivation base skyrocketed to Shudan stage. The next stage of the non-phased diamond sword, which was supposed to be the most difficult, was inadvertently touched because of his life overdraft. He successively defeated Silverback, Chiho, Catgirl, Asya, and even Tiger King Lei Zhen. Plus, after returning to the mountain, he wrote an impassioned article, which pushed his reputation value to a level that his peers couldn't even hope to catch up with. Of course, the biggest harvest was the shape-shifting immortal beast Bai Shixian. It was just that Wang Lu didn't think that the arrival of Bai Shixian would also bring him all kinds of trouble. Just to prove his innocence in front of the lady boss, Wang Lu had already spent a considerable amount of energy. As for the rumors that circulated in the Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Lu simply turned a blind eye to them. One of the main reasons that made the clarification work so laborious was the absence of the person involved, Bai Shixian. After she entered the mountain, the sect leader personally granted her the sword mark, which allowed her to enjoy the treatment of a Taoist master of the King Pill. However, shortly after, she was taken away by the peak master of the Clear Sky Peak Ao Guanhai, to go into seclusion. In fact, it was thanks to Bai Shixuan's good luck that when the girl was full of curiosity, she happened to be seen by Ao Guanhai, who happened to pass by. This elder, who had always been close to nature and understood the spirituality of all living things, could see that Bai Shixian was hiding a great hidden danger. She was the spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain that was enlightened by the moonlight. After the Emperor Essence, she gained an independent life, and at the same time, transformed into a delicate and beautiful girl. However, in fact, according to the standard of common creatures, Bai Shixian was actually a newborn baby. In the previous 60 years, she occasionally appeared in the mountain in the form of a white spirit dog, just like a baby that occasionally rolled in its mother's belly to show its existence. As a newborn, Bai Shixian was taken away from her hometown. Although she had the physique of an immortal beast and had a strong adaptability to the environment, even without the nourishment of the Grand Cloud Mountain, it was not a big deal. However, the spiritual energy of the Spirit Sword Mountain was far richer than that of the Grand Cloud Mountain, and as an immortal cultivation sect, the change and agitation of the surrounding spiritual energy was relatively intense, which made it difficult for the fragile Bai Shixian to adapt. When the girl was on the mountain, her face always carried an intoxicating blush as if she was in love, which was beautiful. However, the fact was that her body had a serious rejection reaction. Although Bai Shixian was born with intelligence and could see through people's heart, she couldn't see the crisis in her. Fortunately, Ao Guanhai discovered it and took her to clear the situation. Before Bai Cloud Mountain Sect Spirit Abode He Cloud Mountain by Lucier Renha Su Cloud Sect. The time for Bai Shixian to recuperate would not be long, but it would still take at least 10 days to half a month. However, Elder Ao Guanhai had always been elusive on the mountain, and he usually wouldn't tell anyone what he was doing. Therefore, when the cultivators on the Spirit Sword Mountain suddenly found out that Bai Shixian was missing, they accused Wang Lu of having a mistress in his house, which worsened the already chaotic public opinion environment. And in this chaos, the only one who could bring peace of mind to Wang Lu was Lu Li. Although she had experienced a lot in the experiential learning in the Grand Cloud region, the girl was always naive, like a clear spring in the turbid world of mortals. Contrary to what many people expected, Lu Li actually didn't care about the rumor that Wang Lu and Bai Shixian were really in love with each other. When asked, the girl frankly said, "Isn't it good that we really love each other? I also love little Bai and I also hope little Bai loves me." "Then what do you mean by secretly in love?" Wang Lu lovingly stroked the girl's head, thought for a moment and then explained, "It means the relationship is particularly close." Lu Li beamed with joy and bounced up and down as she asked, "Then let's also secretly in love, okay?" While sighing with emotion, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel that Lu Li was indeed Lu Li. At the same time, he couldn't bear to disappoint the girl's expectant gaze. He thought, in any case, I'm the one who bought the Lingyun 2000 luxurious flying boat, so why should I care so much? "Okay. Hee senior brother, I know you're the best." Since he and Lu Li had already made us secretly in love, naturally there wouldn't be any dry wood burning fire scene. In Wang Lu's view, although the girl's figure was plump and enchanting, and her face had gradually become more feminine, as long as he saw her innocent smiling face, Wang Lu felt that he would have a desire for such a person, which was a real pervert. After the joking privately in love, the two quickly resumed the romantic and warm rhythm of life before they went down the mountain for experiential learning. Ding, dang, clang clang. A series of crisp sounds of metal clashing continued on the training field of the brilliant peak. Although there were dozens of silencing stone pillars at the edge of the field, which absorbed 80 to 90% of the loud sound in the field. The remaining aftermath was still like the spring thunder blooming, shaking the earth. In the training field, Lu Li flew on her flying sword. More than 10 flying swords circled around her body, dancing along with the girl's figure, like a gorgeous rainbow. And Wang Lu's feet stepped on the ground. His sword of Mount Kuan was as heavy as a mountain, which built a strong barrier that would never collapse. A moment later, the 12 flying swords in the sky converged into one, which, like a divine punishment, went straight into the ground and collided head-on with Wang Lu's sword of Mount Kuan. The edge of the training field suddenly flashed a piece of faint blue light. The array that resisted and converged the scattered energy in the field was fully activated, trying to absorb the scattered magical power and sword intent from the astonishing collision. After a long time, as the surging dust slowly fell, the result of the confrontation between Brilliant Sword Heart and Non-Phase Sword came out. Lu Li giggled innocently, wiped her nose with one hand, and made a victory gesture with the other. I win. As soon as her voice fell, one of her front teeth fell down, which made the girl's smile look particularly funny. On the other side, Wang Lu was both angry and amused at the same time. Win my ass. Your flying sword didn't work, so you directly hit me with your face? Look at your funny face, what do you think it looks like? Lu Li confidently said, Senior brother, you said that as long as I can leave a mark on your body, I win. Look at your chest. Wang Lu didn't need to look to know that his red and white robe had been dyed red by Lu Li's nosebleed. According to the agreement before the fight, it was indeed his loss. This girl. Brilliant Sword Heart's ability to grasp the opportunity was indeed unparalleled in the world. Since the experiential learning on the Grand Cloud Mountain, the gap between the two's cultivation base had actually widened a bit. In addition, Wang Lu had a bit of experience with his non-phased diamond sword. According to the normal fighting style, Lu Li simply couldn't break his sword defense. Before the fight, the agreement was that as long as she could leave a mark on Wang Lu's body, she would win. However, even so, Wang Lu calculated that his chance of winning was more than 80%. As a result, when the fight started, Lu Li's Brilliant Sword Heart and Imperial Sword technique were indeed ineffective. She couldn't even cut the hem of Wang Lu's clothes. However, just when Wang Lu thought that the victory was in his grasp, she suddenly launched all of her magical power. Although the combined attack of the 12 flying swords couldn't hurt the enemy, it pushed the sword of Mount Kuan to the side. The next moment, the girl's pretty face smashed into him like a meteorite. It was really tragic. Forget it, I lost. According to the agreement, I'll give you a month's supply of candy. Oh, senior brother is the best. You should fix your front teeth first before you cheer. The above scene was not unusual for Wang Lu and Lu Li. Almost every day they had their routine actual combat training. In this experiential learning in Cloud Region, the two of them simultaneously advanced to shoot on stage in Green Lake. Their cultivation base skyrocketed, and they needed to consolidate it through actual combat. And the best actual combat opponent was none other than each other. As a matter of fact, the practice of sword fight had been around for a long time. 5 years ago in the sex tournament, Wang Lu beat Lu Li in a big upset. At that time there was a lot of controversy. However, as the person involved, Lu Li didn't care whether Wang Lu's method was honorable or not. She only felt that the other party's cultivation base was obviously lower than hers, yet he still defeated her, which was really an amazing thing. At the same time, she also had a strong interest in the non-phase sword with its amazing defensive power. Shortly after the end of the sex tournament, she took the initiative to ask for a fight. The friendship between the two began from then on. Along with the sword fight, their friendship gradually deepened. In the next 5 years, the two became each other's best friend, but also the best opponent. Their dedication to a mortal path, as well as the relatively simple part of their character, made it so that once they walked on the training field and faced each other with their swords, the cold sword light would freeze all the warmth. And once the winner and loser were decided, the previous killing intent melted like snow and was replaced by a warm and loving atmosphere. In fact, this was inconceivable to many people. In the past 5 years, the two of them had fought more than 1,000 times, and all of them had severely injured each other. Occasionally, they would even alarm the Heavenly Sword Hall elders to come and save them. If they were friends, how could they be so ruthless? And if they were ruthless, how could they still be friends? However, these two weirdos could do it. After this round of sword fight, Wang Lu was willing to concede defeat. Using a spell, he washed away the miserable nosebleed on his lapel and, without hesitation, threw a bag of expensive high-grade candy to Lu Li. That was the specialty of the exquisite pavilion of the mysterious Sky Mansion. Each candy contained a special spiritual object, meticulously made by a master-level immortal craftsman. It was more expensive than the same weight of high-grade spirit stone. The bag that Wang Lu threw was enough to make his master go crazy. Luli was overjoyed. She threw herself into Wang Lu's arms like a spoiled child and then happily tasted the candy. It was just that after eating too, the girl's face revealed a sad look. Alas, senior brother, your cultivation base is improving faster and faster. I'm afraid it will be more and more difficult for me to win against you in the future. This time, she won by using the face mallet, which could be considered as a surprise victory. However, the same trick would not work twice against a professional adventurer. Thus, Luli couldn't help but worry. A moment later, the girl faintly sighed. If only I could be as powerful as senior sister Zhu Shiyao. The speaker was unintentional, but the listener was interested. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but be startled. Luli was a very interesting person. Although she looked silly and stupid, she was not really slow-witted. Therefore, a lot of words that seemed to be inadvertently said actually had a deep meaning. For example, this sentence. From another point of view, if Luli was as powerful as Zhu Shiyao, would she be able to win against him? And just at this time, a not too big nor too small news came into Wang Lu's ears. The number one successor disciple of Lingjian School, Zhu Shiyao, who went to the Southern Heaven region for experiential learning, had returned to the mountain. Chapter 223. The legend of Zhu Shiyao has been a hot topic in Spirit Sword Mountain for many years. The reason was very simple. Apart from the former successor disciple who was deliberately treated coldly by the Heavenly Sword Hall, Zhu Shiyao was the well-deserved number one successor disciple 10 years ago, the big sister of all the disciples in Lingjian School. 10 years ago, Zhu Shiyao was just a young girl. Although she had lived on the mountain for many years, she had just officially started immortal cultivation. Her cultivation base was shallow, and she didn't have Wang Lu's ability to shine as a novice. However, from that time on, this big sister had an inviolable majesty in the eyes of others. Majesty came from three aspects. The first was her character, which was different from Wang Lu's passion and Lu Li's naive and lively. Zhu Shiyao's temperament was very indifferent, like a solitary flower on a high mountain. In addition to the necessary bottom-line politeness, she refused to have any superfluous relationship with other people. The second was because her whole mind was on immortal cultivation, and her dedication to the way of the sword was enough to make anyone feel inferior. As one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, the Lingjian School had a very high entry threshold. Most of its disciples were keen on immortal cultivation, and there were very few lazy people. There were also many like Wang Lu and Lu Li who often risked their lives in actual combat. However, compared with Zhu Shiyao, they were still too distracted. Needless to say, Wang Lu and Lu Li, after the sword fight, they often went to the cafeteria of the Carefree Peak to eat and drink. If Lu Li lost the sword fight, she would go to the Misty Peak to help Aya develop new dishes. Life outside of immortal cultivation was rich and colorful. The other cultivators were even more so. Outside of immortal cultivation, the atmosphere in Lingjian School was quite active. Like in the novels, those madmen who did closed-door training for 100 years, walking, sitting, and lying down all the time were rarely seen in the entire 9 regions. However, Zhu Shiyao had nothing but her sword. In the more than 20 years since she entered the Spirit Sword Mountain, she spent almost all of her time in closed-door training at the Stellar Peak. It was only in recent years that she gradually became more approachable. She was obviously the big sister of Lingjian School, but in the past 10 years, a considerable number of people in the sect had never seen her face. It could be considered a miracle. But regardless of whether or not they had seen Zhu Shiyao in person, the legends about her were like thunder to the ears. Although very few people had actually seen her in action, there had always been such a rumor in the sect, even in the entire 9 regions. Among the cultivators of the same generation, no one could block Zhu Shiyao's stellar divine sword. And this was the third and most important reason why Zhu Shiyao was revered by people: strength. 5 years ago, Lingjian School and 10,000 Arts sect carried out a big competition between their disciples. Although that competition ended in a complete victory for Lingjian School, the strength of the 5 uniques of 10,000 Arts sect was still fully demonstrated. Were it not for the performance of Wang Lu and Lu Li that was too heaven-defying, Zhan Zai and the others' brilliance was actually unstoppable. Even so, afterward, many of the elders in the Lingjian School sighed with emotion. Unfortunately, their big sister Zhu Shiyao couldn't participate in the battle. Otherwise, the 10,000 Arts sect wouldn't have the chance to show off their strength. It would not be Wang Lu's turn to be an unexpected winner. Zhu Shiyao's strength, for many disciples of Spirit Sword sect, has been engraved in their hearts like the truth. Even Lu Li, who was also revered and loved by many disciples of Spirit Sword sect, also held Zhu Shiyao's divine sword in high esteem. When asked, she would always bluntly say, "My ability is far worse than big sister's." Actually, although Lu Li and Zhu Shiyao's entry time was a few years apart, the two's official cultivation time was almost the same. Being able to make a genius like Lu Li feel ashamed of her inferiority, Zhu Shiyao's valiant strength was also enough to prove it. Some people said that Grand Senior Sister was like a towering monument that would never fall. However, people also said that, in front of the monument, a shovel digger has quietly come. Sooner or later, a certain chief disciple who was in the limelight would have a showdown with eldest senior sister. A certain lead disciple Wang Lu, who was in the limelight, had always ignored this kind of rumor. He and Zhu Shiyao had no grievance nor enmity, so why would they want to be tit for tat? In the 10 years since he entered the mountain, Wang Lu and Zhu Shiyao had met no more than 3 times. Each time they were separated by a long distance and they couldn't even say a word. In this case, even if they wanted to form a grudge, there was no way to talk about it. If one must say something, it was nothing more than after Wang Lu obtained the title of the lead disciple 5 years ago, there were some sour remarks in the mountain, saying that his title as the lead disciple was unjustifiable and so on. However, Wang Lu never took it to heart. If you have the ability, why don't you snatch the title of the lead disciple on the stage without justifiable reason? If someone tried to use Zhu Shiyao's divine sword to provoke him, Wang Lu would only respond with a sentence, "Let Zhu Shiyao come in front of me and say that." As for Lu Li, over the years she had almost become Wang Lu's pet, so she simply couldn't be used as a material to provoke him. Wang Lu's mind had always been very clear. He was very clear that his biggest competitive advantage was not the hardness of non-phase sword, but the ability to comprehensively utilize all aspects of the conditions. In short, it was the comprehensive quality. 5 years ago he defeated Lu Li. Did he rely on his cultivation base? Stirring up trouble on the Grand Cloud Mountain, did he rely on his cultivation base? Therefore, even if his cultivation base was not as good as someone else, he wouldn't care. Now, because of the Green Lake immortal fate, his cultivation base was able to suppress Lu Li. If in the future Lu Li overtook him, he would not feel pressured. As for his cultivation base being inferior to Zhu Shiyao, it was not even worth mentioning. On one hand, he really didn't care about the gap in cultivation base. On the other hand, it was because he had enough confidence that even if his cultivation base was not as good as Zhu Shiyao's, he could still find a chance to defeat Zhu Shiyao in actual combat, just like how he defeated Lu Li 5 years ago. Until today, when he heard Lu Li's casual words, Wang Lu couldn't help but be startled. It turns out that in Lu Li's opinion, even if I use all my means, I'm still not Zhu Shiyao's opponent? Is Big Sister really that powerful? With this curiosity, Wang Lu pulled Lu Li and joined the crowd of onlookers to watch the return of his big sister. This time, Zhu Shiyao's experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region attracted a great deal of attention. This was Zhu Shiyao's first formal experiential learning. 7 years ago, she was instructed by the sect leader not to participate in the experiential learning. This was her first time officially stepping out of the sect to participate in the major event of the immortal cultivation world. The content of the experiential learning has long been spread. The sect leader wanted her to go to the ancient sword tomb in the Southern Heaven region to compete for a high-rank spiritual treasure ancient sword that was about to be born. At the same time, there were also hundreds of sects, a total of 2,000 to 3,000 cultivators, among which there were many cultivators from high-rank sections. 3 of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League also went. Spirit Sword Sect, Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect. Of course, these 3 sects sent their disciples. Even so, the pressure of the competition was so great that the cultivators on the mountain were secretly sweating for Zhu Shiyao. In such a gathering of powerful and influential people, no one dared to say that they had 100% certainty. If it was Wang Lu who participated in the experiential learning, perhaps people's confidence would be 2 points higher. After all, Wang Lu was best at fishing in troubled waters, and the more people, the better it would be for him. Although Zhu Shiyao's swordsmanship was divine, she had been isolated from the world for more than 20 years. To some extent, perhaps she was even more ignorant than Lu Li. She had been practicing swordsmanship all her life, so when she encountered a problem, she could only use her sword as the answer. However, in the ancient sword tomb, there were many powerful cultivators, and it was said that there were even great deity stage cultivators. No matter how sharp Zhu Shiyao's stellar soul sword was, she was just a Shudan stage cultivator, so how could she defeat a deity stage cultivator? With such curiosity and worry, the disciples of Lingjian school have been guessing the result of the experiential learning. Now that the news of Zhu Shiyao's return to the mountain had spread, suddenly, countless sword lights flew from all corners to the 4 Divisions Peak, which was the transit station between Lingjian School and the outside world. When Wang Lu and Lu Li arrived, the square of the 4 Divisions Peak was already crowded with people. Hundreds of cultivators huddled together, clamoring and seething. Some were curious about the situation, and some were shouting, "Big sister, we love you." The scene was extremely chaotic. If one only saw this scene, perhaps no one would believe that Lingjian School was the one with the most withered population among the 5 uniques. Despite the crowd's interference, Wang Lu immediately saw Zhu Shiyao. Because, although there were many people in the square, the presence of hundreds of people was far less than that of the indifferent woman who was hovering in midair. This was the first time for Wang Lu to carefully observe Zhu Shiyao. The woman was as aloof and indifferent as the rumor said. Her whole person was like a cold sword, making it difficult for people to get close to her. She was born with a slender and graceful figure, and had a delicate and refined face. However, that pair of eyes that were as sharp as the edge of a sword made it impossible for others to get close to her. Even if it was just a glance from the corner of her eyes, it would make one feel as if they were being pricked by needles. She was indeed the dignified big sister. Although he hadn't really fought with her, but, to be able to make his non-phase sword intent feel as if he was being pricked by a needle, the intensity of Zhu Shiyao's stellar sword intent was already beyond his imagination. Then when he saw Zhu Shiyao, Wang Lu guessed the result of her experiential learning. It was not difficult to guess because on Zhu Shiyao's waist, there was a simple and square sword with profound sword intent. The ancient high-rank spiritual treasure sword was in her hand, so the result of her experiential learning was needless to say. Wang Lu was not the only one who saw the spoils of war. Therefore the cheers soon came one after another. Although Zhu Shiyao's face was still as indifferent as ice, it did not hinder the enthusiasm of the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect in the square. A moment later, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared beside Zhu Shiyao, which made the cheers in the square go up a notch. That was the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect, Feng Yin Taoist Master. The result of Zhu Shiyao's victory seemed to be within Feng Yin Taoist Master's expectation. Seeing the ancient sword on Zhu Shiyao's waist, Feng Yin was gratified but not surprised. He repeatedly nodded and said with a smile, "Well done." Zhu Shiyao's reaction was very cold. She slightly nodded, which could be considered as a response to her master's praise. Then she gently frowned and glanced around. Meaning, "I'm not used to so many people looking at me." Feng Yin Taoist Master seemed to have made up his mind to let his disciple be in the limelight. He shook his head and said with a smile, "This time, when you went to the Southern Heaven region for experiential learning, everyone is very concerned about you." Zhu Shiyao slightly tilted her head, meaning, "What does that have to do with me? You're the big sister of Lingjian School and also an example for your peers. However, you've always been mysterious, so I, as your master, have been criticized. This time, I want you to stay at the 4 Divisions Peak for a while, hoping that you can take this opportunity to show everyone the harvest of your experiential learning, which can also satisfy everyone's curiosity." However, Zhu Shiyao's eyebrows wrinkled even tighter, and her eyes revealed a look of embarrassment. I don't know what to do." However, after a moment, seeing that her master didn't give any hint, Zhu Shiyao could only helplessly bow her head and think. After a while, the woman softly opened her mouth. Her voice was not as sharp and cold as her sword intent. Instead, it slightly trembled, showing a bit of helplessness. She really didn't have the experience of speaking in front of everyone. I'm not very good at speaking." The next moment, the unfamiliarity in her words was completely restrained. "So, I'll demonstrate it with a sword." Chapter 224. I'm not very good at talking. When Zhu Shiyao, like a shy little girl, said this sentence, Wang Lu inwardly sneered. Could it be that the next sentence is, "What did I do to offend you that you King want to hit me?" However, the next moment, Zhu Shiyao pulled out the sword from her waist, and the bewildered look on her face disappeared. Instead, a biting cold intent that was even more severe than ice spread out from her pair of eyes. "Therefore, I will demonstrate it with a sword." As soon as her voice fell, the world changed color. In Wang Lu's eyes, the world suddenly turned into black and white. The distant mountains and rivers were shrouded behind a fuzzy-colored glaze cover, no longer clear. Inside the glaze cover, a haze floated up. Even Lu Li, who was very close to him, seemed to have lost her vitality and turned into a dead thing. Between heaven and earth, only Zhu Shiyao and the ancient sword in her hand were still glowing with color. Zhu Shiyao stood there with the sword in her hand. She and the sword gradually merged into one, emitting an incomparably sharp sword light. Everything around her was dimmed by the light. Wang Lu felt that it was gradually difficult to breathe, as if his heart was being held by an invisible force. Just as Wang Lu shook his jade mansion and void core, trying to expel this indescribable abnormal feeling from his body, the sharp sword light suddenly became 10 times more intense. Wang Lu subconsciously narrowed his eyes, but because of the focus, his eyes became even sharper. Facing the intense sword light, he clearly saw the true appearance of the light. It was countless fragmented light that blended together, emitting a sword light as blazing as the sun. And this sword light was clearly the Stellar Peak's secret technique, Stellar Sword Chi? And looking at the momentum of this sword light, it was clearly coming for him? Wang Lu was inwardly shocked. He never thought that Zhu Shiyao would actually attack him in full view of the public. The power of this Stellar Sword Chi was enough to split the mountain and reverse the river, but now, without any concealment, it came whistling towards him. Almost subconsciously, Wang Lu summoned his sword of Mount Kuan and reluctantly used his non-phase sword art to parry the incoming attack. His 3-feet sword defense unfolded, propping up an unbreakable defense. However, in the next moment, Wang Lu felt a chill on his forehead. A speck of dust fell on his head like a cold star. What? The 3-feet sword defense was broken? Wang Lu instinctively took half a step back in shock. Wah! As if he had stepped on a piece of glass, Wang Lu clearly heard a clear shattering sound. Then, thousands of crisscrossing cracks filled his vision, and the world of black and white collapsed. What replaced it was still the colorful 4 divisions peak. The floating clouds on the horizon were still lazily floating, and the mountain breeze still carried a trace of fresh fragrance. It was just that the surroundings seemed exceptionally quiet. The hundreds of disciples who were originally noisy were now silent. When Wang Lu looked at them, he saw that all of them maintained their retreating posture. Some of them even fell to the ground, their faces were stiff, and some of them had large beads of sweat on their faces. Thinking about it, the illusion of his skull being pierced by the Stellar Sword Chi just now was not unique to him. Forcibly suppressing the throbbing in his heart, Wang Lu had figured out the principle of Zhu Shiyao's move. This was Zhu Shiyao's demonstration. She couldn't speak, so the only way she could express it was with her sword. Her harvest from this trip to the Southern Heaven region was all in that sword strike just now. That sword strike might be her own sword intent, or it might be an illusion that was amplified by a high-rank spiritual treasure. However, in short, under her sword strike, none of the hundreds of cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect could withstand it head-on. Even Wang Lu was no exception. The awe-inspiring might of the big sister of Spirit Sword Sect was undoubtedly revealed. At this moment, there seemed to be thousands of thoughts turning in Wang Lu's mind, but he was at a loss. Perhaps it was just an illusion, but everything that he experienced was so real. In his mind, the scene of Zhu Shiyao's Stellar Sword Chi attack and him being unable to resist it took a long time to disappear. Wang Lu believed that if he really fought with Zhu Shiyao, the result would not be any different from the illusion. Even the world's strongest non-phase sword defense could not block that unpredictable Stellar Sword Chi. At this time, when he recalled the confrontation just now, every moment was particularly clear. How he propped up his sword defense in the first place, and how that Stellar Sword Chi broke his defense, had already been deeply imprinted in his mind. In terms of pure attack power, although Zhu Shiyao's Stellar Sword Chi was powerful, it was far inferior to Lu Li's brilliant sword heart, the destructive power of the 12 flying swords combined into one. However, there was a trace of elusive profoundness in her non-phase sword defense. His own non-phase sword defense didn't have any flaw, yet it was directly pierced through the non-existent flaw and then came out. This was obviously unreasonable, but compared to complaining about the reasonableness of it, it was better to find a plausible explanation. Wang Lu frowned and thought deeply about the reason. Unknowingly, time quickly slipped away. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lu suddenly woke up. He saw that the crowd around him had gradually dispersed, and Zhu Shiyao herself had disappeared without a trace. Only some cultivators were still immersed in their thoughts like him. The noisy onlookers' ceremony hurriedly came to an end. Although there were still unsolved doubts in his mind, Wang Lu also knew that now was not the time. He patted Lu Li beside him, ready to call her to leave. However, he heard Lu Li softly snort. Her body leaned forward and was about to fall. Wang Lu hastily held her up. The girl's face was pale, and the corner of her mouth overflowed with blood. Unexpectedly, she suffered an internal injury. Wang Lu recalled that just now, under Zhu Shiyao's sword strike, hundreds of disciples on the square retreated. Even he himself had to take half a step back. Some of the others even retreated more than 10 steps. Only Lu Li, not only did she not retreat, she even withstood the pressure and took a step forward. It's indeed fierce and valiant. Unfortunately, other people's minds were only affected by it. Only you were injured by the backlash of your magical power going astray. Why bother? Wang Lu sighed with emotion that Lu Li would always be Lu Li, but at the same time, he also felt distressed for the little girl's injury. He could no longer ponder over the mystery of stellar sword qi and immediately stuffed an expensive healing pill into her mouth. Then he took Lu Li back to the Brilliant Peak to see his fourth uncle Zhou Ming. Seeing that Lu Li was injured, Zhou Ming didn't blame Wang Lu. He just frowned and sighed. This child is still eager to win. Wang Lu curiously asked, "Why do you say that?" Zhou Ming explained, "Just now, when Yao Er stimulated her sword intent, do you understand the principle behind it?" Wang Lu said, "Although I don't know the details, it should be a kind of illusion." Zhou Ming corrected, "It's stellar diffraction technique." Stellar diffraction technique also has this effect? Wang Lu curiously asked, "Could it be that what I saw just now was the scene deduced by stellar diffraction technique?" Zhou Ming said, "Yes, the essence of stellar diffraction technique is to see through the change of cause and effect, reflecting all kinds of possibilities in the future into your perception." Yao Er used her supreme sword intent to stimulate stellar diffraction technique, and then the result was reflected in each of your hearts. Thus, in your eyes, it was as if you were really fighting with Yao Er. Wang Lu clicked his tongue and said, "And then she couldn't even block one sword strike and was defeated. Big sister is indeed big sister." As soon as she returned to the mountain, she couldn't wait to show everyone her strength. Zhou Ming smiled and said, "You misunderstood her. She doesn't have such complicated thoughts. Senior brother asked her to demonstrate the harvest of this experiential learning to you, and she just acted according to the order. This extreme diffraction sword language is her harvest in the Southern Heaven Sword Tomb. Before this experiential learning, she couldn't do it to this extent. Moreover, don't you think that being dragged into the illusion of stellar diffraction technique by her sword language and personally experiencing her stellar soul sword is also beneficial to your cultivation?" "Hee, it's okay." Wang Lu smiled and vaguely responded. Indeed, after Zhu Shiyao's sword defense was broken, he was shocked, and Wang Lu faintly realized that there seemed to be many details of the non-phase sword art that needed to be perfected. If it weren't for this sword, perhaps he wouldn't have discovered it. Yao Er is the big sister of Lingjian school, so she has the obligation to guide the cultivation of her fellow disciples. Since she's not good with words, she used her sword language to show off her cultivation base and also let her fellow disciples gain something. This is killing two birds with one stone. Zhou Ming said and somewhat helplessly looked at Lu Li, who was curled up on the bed to recuperate. Unfortunately, this child Lu Li still can't let go. Zhou Ming said and then sighed. "You've been with her for the longest time, so you should be able to see that although this child is naive and without scheming, she's not without ideas, just eating and waiting to die. She's very devout in the way of the sword, and she's also very persistent in every opponent in the way of the sword. These years, you've fought with her for more than 1,000 times, so you should have a deep understanding." Wang Lu was silent. Uncle Zhou Ming was right. No matter how cute and silly Lu Li usually was, once she held a sword in her hand, it was as if she had changed into a different person. Her devout devotion to the way of the sword was even higher than his own. These years, in more than 1,000 sword fights, Lu Li lost more than she won. However, Wang Lu could always see the desire to win in her clear eyes. And in the face of Zhu Shiyao's stellar sword qi, Lu Li would rather be injured to fight for that slim chance of winning. Obviously, although she usually admitted that her cultivation base was not as good as Zhu Shiyao's, deep in her heart, she didn't want to admit defeat. If there was a chance, she would always fight for victory. Unfortunately, in the end, she didn't get what she wanted. Looking at the curled-up Lu Li, the girl's brows slightly wrinkled as if she was still in a coma. Wang Lu sighed with emotion and gently touched her cheek. Why would the weak fight? However, he remembered that he was also defeated in one sword strike, so he didn't seem to have the qualification to laugh at others. After a while, Wang Lu got up to leave and walked outside. Just as he walked out of the door, he felt a strange fluctuation coming from outside the courtyard. The surrounding air became a bit colder. Then a small, slightly helpless voice rang out. Fourth Martial Aunt, I followed Master's instruction to come, to see junior sister Lu Li." The voice was stuttering and full of jerkiness, as if it was difficult to recite unfamiliar lines. A moment later, the eldest martial sister of Lingjian school didn't wait for anyone to greet her. She walked straight into the courtyard holding a basket of fruits in her hand, and met Wang Lu who was walking outside. Wang Lu suddenly stopped and was thinking about how to greet the eldest martial sister. However, he saw that the other party didn't stop and went straight into the room. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even look at Wang Lu, completely ignoring him. My goodness, the eldest martial sister of Lingjian school is really arrogant. Wang Lu's heart was moved and some words were about to come out of his mouth. However, he immediately remembered that he was defeated by her, so what was the use of saying empty words? Thus he suppressed it. Just now, he lamented that he didn't have a short-term goal after the experiential learning in Grand Cloud Mountain. Now didn't a goal come knocking on his door? The eldest martial sister of Lingjian school. This title was really cool, much more domineering than the lead disciple. Just you wait, sooner or later, I will sign a contract with the immortal beast and become the eldest martial sister of Lingjian school. Hey, wait a minute, something seems wrong? Chapter 225. Master Urgent Help. After returning to Non-Phase Peak from Brilliant Peak, Wang Lu immediately sought outside assistance. His master was indeed his master. She very righteously said, "Ah, young man, looking at your gloomy glabella and sad face, presumably, the bitterness of being lovelorn has welled up in your heart, and you need a mature and charming woman to soothe your pain." Wang Lu was silent for a long time, and then seriously said, "Actually, I have seriously reflected on it. The Grand Cloud Fairy is a peerless beauty. Not being able to keep her is my biggest regret in my 10 years of cultivation. Indeed, I miss her because of this, but rather than saying that I'm heartbroken, I'm more moved by her selfless sacrifice. Moreover, even if there is any pain seeing your shameless face, I can't feel sad anymore." His master indifferently chuckled and said, "You have the right to be stubborn. Say it, what is it? It's not easy to make you beg me." Wang Lu said, "There are not many places where you can be of use. Of course it's about cultivation. I want to know how to be Zhu Shiyao." His master was suddenly stunned. "Zhu Shiyao? How did you get involved with her?" Wang Lu thought for a moment and felt that this question was quite difficult to answer. If he directly told him that it was because he was angry because he was treated as a nobody in Brilliant Peak, it would be too narrow-minded. If he said that he was unwilling because he was forced to retreat by a sword on 4 Divisions Peak, it would also not be magnanimous enough. Therefore, Wang Lu coldly said, "Because one mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers." His master scolded, "Fart. One mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers, then what are Feng Yin and Lu Xian, sick cats? Since when did it become the turn of a disciple like you to be the king?" "I am the sun in the morning." "Then Zhu Shiyao is the haze that covers the sky. You really chose the wrong opponent this time." His master spread out his hands and said, "If you want to fight head-on, you can't win." This answer really surprised Wang Lu. After seeing Zhu Shiyao's amazing stellar divine sword, Wang Lu was very clear about the gap between him and her. However, after careful examination, it was not necessarily as different as Cloud and Mud. Although his non-phase sword art was broken, it was only because he was caught off guard for a moment. As long as he was slightly on guard, he would still be able to fight. Zhu Shiyao's level of cultivation was similar to his, so there was no reason for her to be that much stronger than him. Therefore, he expected that she would only need to practice hard and learn a few new moves, and then she would be able to turn the tables. If 1 year wasn't enough, 3 to 5 years should be enough. Unexpectedly, Master's conclusion was so decisive. Seeing the surprise on Wang Lu's face, his master could guess what he was thinking. After pondering for a while, as if organizing his words, he lightly explained, "You should have heard of the Son of Destiny." Wang Lu nodded his head. Although this was already the sect's secret, as a successor disciple, he had lived in the mountain for 10 years, so he more or less knew some of it. The so-called Son of Destiny was usually the precursor of the coming of a great era, the sustenance of the destiny of the 9 regions. These people, with the Son of Destiny, could often achieve an amazing career. Great ancestor Dishing and immortal Qin were such examples. And Wang Lu was the Son of Destiny that the sect leader saw in the prophecy 10 years ago, although the process was also accompanied by a misunderstanding. As far as Wang Lu knew, the Lingjian school's immortal gathering 10 years ago was precisely to absorb the Son of Destiny. After he entered the mountain, he spent several years to gradually shine, which gradually made the title of the Son of Destiny well-deserved. Therefore, even if his usual behavior was occasionally out of line, the elders would not care too much about it, except for the most strict disciplinary elder, Fang He. This was undoubtedly the advantage of being the Son of Destiny. Then why did his master bring up this topic? When big sects do things, they rarely gamble. Therefore, in order to cope with the wave of the next great era, Lingjian school has made a lot of preparations. In short, you're not the only Son of Destiny. Not to mention in 9 regions, even in Lingjian school there are substitutes for you. Wang Lu was slightly surprised. So it's the big sister? Of course Lu Li can also be counted, but her weight is a bit lighter. Before you entered the mountain, Zhu Shiyao was the one that everyone had the highest expectation of. Although she didn't have the characteristics to confirm the prophecy, she was too powerful. So much so that, after the calculation at that time, even if there's really a son of destiny, it might not be able to beat her. In fact, until now in the sect leader's heart, your weight and hers are still equal. Equal? His master said, yes, objectively speaking your weight is still a bit heavier. After all, relying on one's own force is not enough to entrust a sect. Whether it's Lu Li or Zhu Shiyao as a cultivator, both of them are the top, but their character flaws are doomed to be unable to lead others as the leader of the sect. But you at least have proved yourself with the wisdom sect. But on the other hand, if you don't have some crooked talent, you're not qualified to be compared with Zhu Shiyao. That ruthless? His master resolutely said, that ruthless. But why do you have to go to a dead end? If your strength is inferior to others, you can use your IQ to gain a sense of superiority. Zhu Shiyao is not as stupid as Lu Li, but in front of you she's definitely not smart. Moreover, although Zhu Shiyao is extremely strong, she is actually very weak as well. She has a fatal weakness, and it just so happens that her combat intelligence is inferior to Liu Li's, who possesses the brilliant sword heart. So for you, grasping her weakness is as easy as lifting a finger. After a pause, Wang Wu simply pointed out the problem. Simply speaking, if you and Zhu Shiyao are put in a life-and-death fight on the arena, 9 out of 10 she would win. However, if you put it in an extremely complex environment, your probability of winning is much higher. Therefore, in the previous 2 experiential learning opportunities, the sect leader sent you to the Grand Cloud Mountain, while she went to the Southern Heaven region. You see, if you look at the problem this way, isn't it a lot easier to accept? Wang Lu coldly snorted. What's the use of adjusting the financial accounting if you can't earn money? If you can't win, then you can't win. Looking for a reason will only make you look weaker. His master applauded without any sincerity. Well said. You're indeed my disciple, your moral integrity is simply overflowing. Then please develop your style and use your iron bones to fight against Zhu Shiyao's stellar soul sword. I wish you good luck. He didn't get any valuable help from his master. Wang Lu knew that it was mostly because his master really had no way to help him. Zhu Shiyao's strength was so absolute and unshakable. A day later, Wang Lu closed his eyes and tried to recall the amazing sword that turned the whole world black and white. However, he still couldn't see the slightest chance. The stellar sword chi was not strong, but it was exquisite enough. It was so exquisite that it could penetrate through the flaws of non-phase sword. Wang Lu tried to deduce it several times. No matter how he changed the sword's momentum, the stellar sword chi would accurately and coldly pierce his forehead. Non-phase sword was by no means a crude sword technique that only relied on brute force. However, under the contrast of that exquisite stellar sword chi, it seemed clumsy and full of flaws. This was simply strange. Wang Lu's non-phase sword art could be considered as having experienced hundreds of battles. Whether it was a low-level loose cultivator like Yi Chuchen, an elite disciple of the 5 uniques like Zhao Jiangyuan, or a profound Taoist master of Yuanying stage like Tiger King, he had fought them all. No one could use pure skill to break non-phase sword art. Before Zhu Shiyao, Wang Lu didn't even consider this possibility. There must be some mystery in this. Considering that his master said she had a fatal weakness, Wang Lu, while pacing outside the cabin, gradually formed an idea in his mind. Could it be that the secret of Zhu Shiyao's strength was? At this time, a golden sword light rapidly flew from the sky. Although the sword's momentum was fast, it was not sharp. Wang Lu's train of thought was interrupted by the sword light. When he took a closer look, he saw that it was a flying sword that was specially used to deliver letters. There's a letter for me? At this time? Wang Lu curiously reached out his hand to catch the flying sword and took down the letter. When he opened it, he was taken aback. The envelope impressively had the imprint of the 10,000 Arts sect. As for the sender, as expected, it was Hai Yunfan. It had been a long time since he last saw him, but in the past few years he had been writing to his good pen pal Hai Yunfan. His correspondence with Hai Yunfan had been frequent, but it was rare to see him use such an extravagant way to send a letter. Generally speaking, it was through Shun Feng Line's ordinary mail, with an interval of 3 to 4 days. However, this golden flying sword could guarantee to arrive at the destination within half a day, which was very expensive. When he opened the letter, Wang Lu was even more surprised. Because it was not the usual ordinary letter paper, but the extremely precious shadow letter paper, a precious tool that could be used for instant communication. The letter paper was in duplicate. When one wrote on one of the paper, the same handwriting would appear on the other side, which could be used for instant communication. The advantage was that this kind of dialogue was highly secretive, which could not be eavesdropped by others. Moreover, it was usually not limited by space. No matter where the two sides were, they could talk using this, which was somewhat similar to the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman. Since Hai Yunfan sent this kind of letter paper, it was obvious that he had something important to discuss with him. Wang Lu gently touched the golden flying sword and left his own magical power imprint to prove that the letter had been received. Then, he held the letter paper and returned to his room. After sitting down at the desk, Hai Yunfan's handwriting appeared on the letter paper. "Brother Wang, it's been many years since we last met, I really miss you." Wang Lu immediately picked up the pen and wrote, "Less nonsense, get down to business. I want to ask about your sect's successor disciple, Zhu Shiyao. Does Brother Wang know anything about her?" Wang Lu immediately cursed, suppressed the confusion in his heart and wrote, "Why do you want to ask about her?" 1.5 months ago, the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region was opened. The heroes of the 9 regions gathered to compete for the ancient relics. My sect's big brother Zhan Zai led a team of 7 people. I thought that the victory was in my grasp, but in the end I was completely defeated by your sect's Zhu Shiyao. After thinking about it, I was shocked and even more puzzled. Therefore, I specifically wrote a letter to ask. Zhu Shiyao is so strong that she defies the natural order. Does your Lingjian school know about this before? Wang Lu was silent. After a while, Hai Yunfan's handwriting began to appear again. There is another question. Brother Wang is the lead disciple of Lingjian school, but, with Zhu Shiyao, how did you become the lead disciple? F***ck don't expose the truth. Although Wang Lu's psychological quality as a professional adventurer was already very strong at this time, he also had the urge to tear the letter. He gritted his teeth, picked up the pen and replied, "Of course, it's because of my wisdom and beauty." Chapter 226. Zhu Shiyao was so powerful, so why should Wang Lu be the lead disciple? Hai Yunfan poked at the hemorrhoid, sore problem, so Wang Lu had no choice but to confess the truth. "Of course, it's because of my wisdom and beauty." After writing, the other side of the letter was silent for a long time. The letter wrinkled a few times as if it had been vigorously kneaded, and then stretched out. On the surface, Hai Yunfan's neat handwriting reappeared. "Back to the main topic? No one is stopping you from getting back to the main topic. I never encouraged you to talk about the lead disciple. Brother Wang really has a deep resentment, haha, but let's talk about the main topic. It's just that, before the main topic we still need some background foreshadowing. Here's the thing, Hai Yunfan spared no expense to carry out a strictly confidential correspondence with Wang Lu. Of course, it was not to make fun of his lead disciple qualification. Next, Hai Yunfan briefly narrated the experience of the 7 of them exploring the sword tomb in the southern heaven region 1.5 months ago. Wang Lu was also quite interested in this. The news of the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region had spread throughout the 9 regions, and the heroes of the world had gathered. How did Zhu Shiyao stand out from the crowd? This experience would certainly give Wang Lu a lot of useful reference. At that time, there were more than 2,000 cultivators around the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region. Excluding some miscellaneous small sects that came to join in the fun and try their luck, there were hundreds of cultivators that were worth paying attention to. In addition to the elite disciples of the younger generation of the major sects, some of the old antiques were unwilling to be left out. This sword tomb may not be attractive to the Unity Stage cultivators, but at that time, there were 3 Deity Stage cultivators, as well as hundreds of Yuanying Stage and King Pill Stage cultivators, which was truly spectacular. However, for our 10,000 Arts sect, the old antiques are actually not that scary. They are too old and outdated. If it's a survival hunting situation, perhaps we are not their opponent, but in this kind of ancient site exploration they have no advantage. The ones worth paying attention to were the elites of the younger generation. I presume that Brother Wang also knows that ever since the Great Change 20 years ago, heroes have appeared in large numbers on the continent. In addition to the 5 uniques, there are also some other sects that often have outstanding core disciples. These people have luck on their bodies and their strength and intelligence are all first-rate in the world. They can often create miracles and trample on some of the older cultivators. At that time, in front of the sword tomb in the southern heaven region, there were 30 or 40 such cultivators. But to be honest, in our eyes, most of the so-called heroes are just SOSO. The ones who are really worth paying attention to are the disciples of the five uniques. At that time, we received the news that, in addition to 10,000 Arts sect, the elite disciples of Spirit Sword sect and Kunlun sect also came to the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region. Our martial brothers and sisters were gearing up for a fight, thinking that we could compete with Brother Wang and Senior Sister Lu Li. However, unexpectedly, we didn't see the shadow of Lingjian school. Instead, we fought with Senior Sister Zhou Mumu and the others from Kunlun sect. Kunlun sect is indeed worthy to be the ancestral land of the immortal path. Senior Sister Zhou's strength is outstanding, in no way inferior to Senior Sister Lu Li. However, Big Brother Zai fought with her 3 times, 2 wins and 1 loss, so he still had a small upper hand. Seeing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but say, "Do you have any shame? Zhou Mumu lost to Zhan Zai, yet you still have the nerve to evaluate her as the same level as Lu Li? Did you forget that a few years ago, Zhan Zai came to the mountain to challenge Lu Li and was beaten into a dog's head? On behalf of all the people in the world, I despise your 10,000 Arts sect." Ah, Brother Wang, you don't know. At that time, after Senior Brother Zai's closed-door training, his cultivation base broke through to Shudan stage. He thought that victory was already in his grasp, but unexpectedly he was still no match for Senior Sister Lu Li's brilliant sword heart. At that time when he returned to the mountain, his heart was like dead ashes. All day long he kept saying that he was going to be alone for the rest of his life. However, unexpectedly when he was disheartened he actually saw through the barrier of love and achieved 10,000 motionless immortal heart, and his strength skyrocketed. According to the professional analysis of the 10,000 Arts sect, even if Senior Sister Lu Li has a low-level Shudan stage cultivation base, it would still be difficult for her to contend against Senior Brother Zai's 10,000 motionless immortal heart. Wang Lu was inexplicably astonished. Preposterous. How come I don't know that there are such benefits to being lovelorn? What? Does nothing continue? Actually, Brother Wang, you don't have to worry about it. Each of us has our own immortal path, and the rhythm of our immortal cultivation is different. Some of us are faster at this time, some of us are faster at that time. Now, it just so happens that it's my 10,000 Arts sect disciples' turn to cultivate a bit faster. In short, we have fought a few rounds with the people of Kunlun Immortal Sect, and gained a small advantage. However, when the gate of the Sword Tomb is opened, no one has the mind to fight with each other anymore. Every ancient Sword Tomb that can survive from the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos to the present day has a huge magical ability. Even the current leader of the immortal cultivation path, Hichu Daoren, would not dare to face it head-on. Therefore, when the Sword Tomb is opened, no matter how many contradictions there are, they have to temporarily put aside and go all out to enter the Sword Tomb. The first level of the Sword Tomb is the Sumeru Mustard Seed Space. When the gate of the Sword Tomb was opened, our original group of more than 2,000 people, in the blink of an eye only 300 people were left. Those small fries who came to join in the fun were simply isolated outside. Later, I heard that they dug 3 feet into the ground, but they still couldn't find any clue of the Sword Tomb. The originally vast Sword Tomb seemed to have disappeared. Wang Lu pondered and wrote, "Disappeared? The main body of the Sword Tomb is not in the Southern Heaven region?" Later, our analysis was like this. The Southern Heaven region is just the entrance to the Sword Tomb. The main body is in a space that is beyond our imagination. That space allows people to leave but not to enter. If you feel that it is difficult to survive, you can use your own spells to escape, but once you go out, you can never come back. However, at that time, when we just entered the first level, everyone was in high spirits and no one intended to give up. And the first level of the Sword Tomb was indeed not difficult. After we were teleported in, our hearts flashed a flash of understanding. We realized that as long as we find 3 golden grasses in a vast grassland, we will be teleported to the next level. Later, someone accidentally found the golden grasses and found that as long as they touched them, they would dissolve into the body and could not be preserved. Therefore, there is no space for us to compete with each other. And the Sword Tomb indeed does not encourage us to fight in this level. On the grassland there are strange misty creatures. Once they find a fight, they will rush up and wrap around the person who started the fight. No matter how hard they struggle, they can't break free. After a while they will disappear. Moreover, they are not teleported out of the Sword Tomb, but they will disappear without a trace. Most likely they are dead. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Invisible killing, the haze is really terrible. Therefore, the most important thing in the first level is how to find the golden grasses. The grassland is vast and boundless, but looking for golden grasses is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Our group of hundreds of people searched the grassland for a whole day, but only a few people found a golden grasses, and without exception, all of them were young cultivators. Those deity-stage Taoist supremes have great magical abilities, but in the sword tomb, they couldn't display them. Instead they were faintly repelled. One of them clearly saw a golden grass, but when he went forward to pick it, the color of the golden grass faded. Wang Lu commented, "They're probably afraid that the old man will cheat them." In short, according to our analysis, this level is a test of a cultivator's luck and affinity. And this is the advantage of young cultivators. Our luck is much better than that of the old man. In addition to this, it depends on other aspects of ability. On the grassland we can't fight, so we can't display our fighting strength. However, our deduction technique and daily knowledge are not prohibited. We soon realized that if we don't have heaven-defying luck, we have to use our brains if we want to collect 3 golden grasses. And in this regard, our 10,000 arts sect is undoubtedly the most advantageous. Under the leadership of eldest brother, the 7 of us launched our great divination technique. Starting from the previous location where we picked up the golden grasses, we analyzed the terrain, soil, air, and other factors to determine the location of the golden grasses. Although we can't do it very accurately, we can greatly reduce the search range. Other people like Senior Sister Zhou of Kunlun Immortal Sect also made a deduction, but their algorithm is obviously not as advanced as ours. Therefore, in 3 days, we were able to collect enough golden grasses for our group of 7 people, while their group of 6 people were still missing 1 golden grasses. It is said that none of the old Yuanying stage and above could find 3 golden grasses. Their primordial spirit is powerful, and their computing power is strong, but their algorithm is backward. Moreover, their adaptability is too poor, and they simply don't know how to adjust their calculation method. However, after entering the second level, we realized that the design of the first level is to a large extent a kind of protection. Without enough computing and adaptability, without enough luck, entering the second level is simply courting death. The second level is in a pitch-black space, where no matter what kind of spell we cast, we can't see anything. Moreover, we're surrounded by murderous spirit. There's a very vicious monster that, once you get within 30 feet of it, it will pounce on you and corrode you into a pool of pus. Moreover, it's very sensitive to primordial spirit. Once you're touched by the primordial spirit, it will endlessly chase you. In such a space we have to find the key to the next level. We can only rely on our hearing, touch, smell, as well as our computing ability. The position and movement of the monster have a regular pattern. If we can calculate it in advance, we can pass through their encirclement. However, this also requires an extremely brilliant computing ability as well as luck. Because there are illusions everywhere in this space, which greatly interferes with our information collection, it's impossible to pass this level by relying on our 10,000 arts sect people alone. After several attempts, even Senior Sister Yi Feifei was almost killed. Later on, when Senior Sister Zhou Mumu and the others arrived, we put aside our previous grudges and began to cooperate, barely passing. And the third level is even more difficult. Fortunately, our 2 sects have joined forces, and our strength is not the same as before, so we stumbled through it. After the third level, we finally arrived at the key point of this experiential learning, the hidden treasure of the sword tomb. The result is really unexpected. Wang Lu could almost hear Hai Yunfan's helpless sigh. I thought the difficulty of the last level was the distribution of benefits with Kunlun Immortal Sect. However, in terms of strength, 10,000 arts sect is a bit stronger, so I was still full of confidence. However, unexpectedly when we opened the door of the hidden treasure, we saw your sect's senior sister Zhu Shiyao holding the ancient spiritual treasure sword, completing the last sacrificial refining. I can understand your mood. Hai Yunfan's sorrowful handwriting floated up, 20 years of childhood sweethearts, separated through the fire of war, parents making things difficult for them and so on. After untold hardships, they finally came together, bowed to the heaven and earth, worshipped their parents, and entered the bridal chamber only to find that the bride was pressed down by a strange man on the bed. Can you really understand this kind of mood? Little Hai, your 10,000 motionless immortal heart should have reached the large success stage, haha. My immortal heart is almost broken. Moreover, my immortal heart is not a cuckold. Aha, in short, what happened then? Then, of course, we were indignant, so we joined hands to subdue her and snatch the ancient sword, but unexpectedly, more than 10 of our 2 sects' elite people were actually defeated by her sword. Although at that time, everyone was exhausted and only 3 to 5% of them were left, but it really made people speechless. Seeing this, Wang Lu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. 1 sword strike defeated more than 10 elites of the 5 uniques? This was really F*** king against the heaven. Big senior sister, do you have to be so powerful? Little Hai, you specifically wrote to me to condemn Zhu Shiyao's despicable and shameless act of stealing the treasure? Hai Yunfan wrote, exploring the sword tomb depended on one's own ability and luck. We couldn't compete with her. Although we were not happy, we were willing to concede defeat. As disciples of the five uniques, we still have this little bit of tolerance. What I want to talk about is the next question. At that time, Zhu Shiyao defeated all of us and floated away. We rested for a moment, and when we were about to return, we found out that the ancient sword tomb was not only 3 layers, there was also a heavenly cave below. In fact, the size of the entire ancient sword tomb was much larger than we originally expected. What we saw at that time was the tip of the iceberg, which was enough to frighten people. I'm afraid that the high-rank ancient sword that Zhu Shiyao took away was only a trivial plaything in the sword tomb, and the big guy is still hidden deeper. This level of ancient ruins is rarely seen in the immortal cultivation world for many years. At present, 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect are strictly confidential. As for Lingjian school, since Zhu Shiyao can explore the 3rd layer, this matter can't be hidden from you. Not to mention, with the mysteriousness of the ancient sword tomb, none of us can handle it alone, so we can only join hands. Therefore, I wrote a letter in advance inviting you to join us in exploring the deeper layer of the sword tomb. I know that your sect's elders will soon make a decision, but whether you want to participate or not, it's the action of your Lingjian school. On the premise that it doesn't violate the principle, I personally invite you. Brother Wang, let's join hands. Wang Lu pondered for a moment and then wrote, Little Hai, you are a good person. Chapter 227. After understanding the whole story of Little Hai's adventure through the shadow letter, it was not difficult for Wang Lu to understand why he was so eager to write him this letter. The setting of the first 3 levels of the ancient sword tomb gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He believed that Little Hai also experienced this feeling, so he immediately thought of him. I still remember Brother Wang's world-shaking one-wave pass task in the Peach Blossom Village 10 years ago, which is simply unprecedented. Presumably, Brother Wang has a unique talent for this kind of level design. In the ancient sword tomb, a cultivator's magical power and even their fighting ability are secondary, but the ability to break the level design is the most important. If I can get Brother Wang's help, I believe I will be successful in every endeavor. Little Hai was really a talkative person. Some words were very important, but he deliberately avoided saying them. Because there was simply no need to say it, Wang Lu would certainly think of it. Cooperation was a win-win situation. Wang Lu's ability to break the level was so powerful, so the 10,000 Arts sect would naturally get great benefits from the cooperation. But what about Wang Lu? What were the benefits of Wang Lu? Little Hai didn't say it because he knew that Wang Lu would definitely think of it. 5 years ago, the 10,000 Arts sect's visit to the Spirit Sword Mountain was indeed somewhat embarrassing. However, the strength of the 10,000 Arts sect would not be dim because of this. In terms of calculation ability alone, no cultivator in the world could be compared to the people of the 10,000 Arts sect. Previously, when the 2 sects exchanged information, Wang Lu's vision was also broadened. He repeatedly praised them as the Yellow Ridge people of the immortal cultivation world. And in the ever-changing situation of the ancient sword tomb, this kind of powerful calculation ability was necessary. In this world, there was no professional adventurer who could be successful in every endeavor. Wang Lu's one-wave pass task in the Peach Blossom Village was also based on a lot of calculation. Cooperating with the 10,000 Arts sect could save him a lot of energy. Moreover, according to Hai Yunfan, now that he had comprehended the 10,000 motionless immortal heart, his strength had skyrocketed to the extent that he could fight against Lu Li. He could be considered as a qualified teammate. Of course, no matter how Hai Yunfan praised Wang Lu and described the future of the cooperation between the 2 parties in an extravagant manner, it could not erase a simple fact. The risk of exploring the ancient sword tomb was extremely high. According to the previous description, the risk of every level in the ancient sword tomb increased. In the first level, the sword tomb even intentionally protected the intruders, but in the second level it began to kill them. The third level was even more difficult, so if one was determined to explore deeper, although the benefits would be greater, they would also have to face greater risks. Was there a need for Wang Lu to take such a risk? With his natural endowment and background, there was absolutely no need for him to be impatient for success. If he cultivated honestly, his future would still be boundless. Moreover, he didn't have the hatred of killing his father or stealing his wife, so why bother? So when Hai Yunfan emphasized on Zhu Shiyao, he was actually providing an answer to this question. Of course it was necessary. Because a mountain cannot contain two tigers. You Wang Lu, the dignified lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, how do you compare with Zhu Shiyao? With her around, how much of your reputation as the chief disciple will remain? So, if you want to maintain your dignity, what should you do? No matter how much controversy there was about Wang Lu, based on Hai Yunfan's understanding of Wang Lu from a big point of view, he was an upright and candid person. In the face of this kind of situation, he certainly wouldn't suppress his opponent, but rather make himself stronger. On the immortal cultivation path, the most taboo was to be impatient for success. However, if one really wanted to advance by leaps and bounds, there was still a way to find the immortal fate. What was the immortal fate? The ripple dream in the green lake of Grand Cloud Mountain was an excellent immortal fate. And in the ancient sword tomb, of course, it also contained the immortal fate. If Wang Lu wanted to overwhelm Zhu Shiyao, step-by-step immortal cultivation was absolutely not enough. This is very good, but are you the one who has the final say? Wang Lu had his own plan, but the issue that needed to be confirmed must be confirmed in writing. Rest assured, if there is no elder's approval, how could I dare to make my own decision? This is the seal. A complex pattern appeared on the shadow letter paper. Wang Lu looked at it and tentatively approved it. Then, when the official document from 10,000 Arts Sect arrives, after our Heavenly Sword Hall has made a decision, if there is no problem, we can start the cooperation. I wish you a happy cooperation. When Wang Lu finished writing the last word, all the handwriting on the shadow letter paper disappeared, and the magical power on the paper dried up, turning it into an ordinary letter paper. The correspondence with Hai Yunfan could only reach a preliminary cooperation intention, and the detailed content had to be discussed at an opportune time. After all, such a big matter couldn't be ignored. After Wang Lu put down the shadow letter paper, his heart gradually stirred. He thought that after coming back from the Grand Cloud Mountain, he could settle down for 1 or 2 years, but he probably couldn't rest for that long. Whether it was the pressure from Zhu Shiyao or the great era that his master said, it made Wang Lu's heart eager to give it a try. Ancient Sword Tomb? I hope it won't disappoint me. Far away in the eastern border region, on a stone platform surrounded by gentle breeze and gentle water, Hai Yunfan gently put down his pen, stretched out his hand, and pulled out the magical power from the shadow letter paper, thus destroying this expensive prop. Then a questioning voice came from behind him. What's the reply from Wang Lu? Hai Yunfan said with a smile. It's done, he agreed. Turning his head, he saw the eldest brother of 10,000 Arts Sect, Zhan Zai, gently standing in a clear pool. His toes set off ripples on the surface of the pool. Upon hearing Hai Yunfan's answer, Zhan Zai was slightly surprised. That's straightforward. Hai Yunfan shrugged. It seems that the pressure from Zhu Shiyao is not small. When it came to Zhu Shiyao, not only Wang Lu was under a lot of pressure, Zhan Zai's figure also sank a bit, and the clear pool rippled. Damn it, what the hell is wrong with that abnormal monster? Thinking of the sword technique that was broken by her in the ancient sword tomb, Zhan Zai could not help but feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. If she was present during the last sect exchange, we wouldn't have been able to do anything. Thinking of that fiasco that happened in a flash, Hai Yunfan couldn't help but sigh. I hope that this exploration of the ancient sword tomb can have a good enough harvest. However, with Zhu Shiyao's strong sword sense, the Lingjian school will certainly send her to explore. Even if we add Wang Lu, we may not. How could there be a reason to be afraid before the fight? Well, since Wang Lu has agreed, let's go back to the sect leader. With that, Zhan Zai stretched out his hand to summon a thunderbolt, which then wrapped him in Hai Yunfan. With a flash of lightning, they had already left the place where Hai Yunfan cultivated at the Gentle Breeze waterfall. The 10,000 Arts Sect was not a lone peak like the Spirit Sword Mountain. Instead, it occupied an extremely vast area with mountains, rivers, jungles and hills, and its interior was divided into many blocks. Zhan Zai took Hai Yunfan across a rushing river, across a misty lake, and then stopped at a plain. They then flew straight up, breaking through the clouds. Above the clouds, there was a huge wheel that blotted out the sky, as if it was the ruler of the sky, overlooking the earth. In the middle of the wheel, a young cultivator sat cross-legged. In his hand, there was a quaint bamboo brush that absorbed the starry night sky, which was like a thick ink. He wrote in the void without stopping. Every time the tip of the brush danced, it would trigger a mysterious force, which left a corresponding mark on the wheel behind the cultivator. After Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan pierced through the clouds, they converged the lightning and entered through an entrance at the edge of the wheel. Then they respectfully walked on the side road that supported the outline of the wheel. The feeling under their feet was neither metal nor wood. Every time they took a step, it would trigger a burst of light, which reflected a piece of writing. Along the way, the two of them had left a long trail of light behind them. However, the cultivator that was far away in the horizon never came close, which inevitably made people wonder whether this huge wheel was boundless or not. However, the two of them were already familiar with this process, so they were not impatient and just patiently moved forward. Before long, the scene in front of them changed, and the cultivator that was far away in the horizon suddenly appeared in front of them. At this time, when they took the last step, the words under their feet just happened to form an article. Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan, as if by prior agreement, bowed in salute. Greetings, sect leader. The young cultivator sitting on the cloud treasure wheel was the famous sect leader of 10,000 Arts sect in 9 regions, Supreme Tianluan. Supreme Tianluan had been cultivating for more than 1,700 years, and now his cultivation base had reached the peak of unity stage, only a few steps away from the Deshang stage. He was one of the top 5 peerless powerhouses in the Wanxian League, a senior who was admired and respected by countless people. It was just that few people knew that the real body of Supreme Tianluan looked like a young man in his 20s or 30s, which contained an amazing vitality and did not seem to decay in the slightest. As Supreme Tianluan himself said, knowledge would never decay. Seeing Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan, Supreme Tianluan didn't stop writing, nor did he move his head. He just lightly said, I see. Since he intends to cooperate, then that's the best. You two go find junior brother Tsang Wu to prepare the official document. When everything is ready, you can leave. Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan responded in unison. As for your question, Zai, my opinion is to treat each other with sincerity. 10,000 Arts sect has pride, and foolish people are not qualified to walk with us. However, since you have personally experienced and recognized the Lingjian school 5 years ago, then treat each other with sincerity. Those who seek knowledge should be open-minded, so don't worry too much. Yes. The second question is, this exploration will not have the help of your seniors. I don't care what the other sects do, there will not be a Taoist master of 10,000 Arts sect. It's not that I'm arrogant, but it's not necessary. Through the first 3 tests, this sword tomb is most likely the tomb of inheritance from the ancient times, which was born in response to the change in the providence of heaven and earth. Before the arrival of the Great Era, it supported the predestined people and left its own inheritance, not for the greedy. In simple terms, if you want to get the real treasure in the sword tomb, there are roughly 4 requirements. Young age, solid foundation, strong plasticity, and predestined people. Specifically, under 40 years old, Shudan stage or above, high-grade spirit root, and unsolidified primordial spirit. Also, recognize the idea of the master of the sword tomb, and be recognized by the master of the sword tomb. The last point is difficult to grasp, but the first few are very standard conditions. At present, only cultivators below the Taoist master of 10,000 Arts sect can meet these conditions, so there's no need to waste manpower. Although you guys haven't cultivated for a long time, and your cultivation is not high, it's time for you to take charge. If you can't do anything without the help of your seniors, then you're not worthy to be a disciple of my 10,000 Arts sect. When you encounter difficulties, use your brain more and remember that knowledge is power. Zhan Zai looked very serious. Yes. The third question is about your doubt, Yunfan. My answer is that it doesn't matter even if you fail. On the contrary, protecting yourself is more important than anything else. The 9 regions is big and Dixian is everywhere. Not to mention, before the world changes, you guys have the capital to fail. Moreover, experiencing 1 or 2 failures is a good thing for you. Didn't Zai cultivate the 10,000 motionless immortal heart because of this? I know that many people in the 10,000 Arts sect think that my idea is too conservative or even too cowardly. Indeed, as the sect leader of the 10,000 Arts sect, I don't have the spirit that a person of the 10,000 Arts sect should have. Compared to the brilliant geniuses in the 10,000 Arts sect, I'm just a scholar with a librarian background. However, after 1,000 years, those brilliant people have died, but I have survived. Speaking to this, Supreme Tianluan slightly stopped writing and smiled. Of course, whether you want to shine or live a long life, the choice is in your hands. Chapter 228. On the stellar peak of Spirit Sword Mountain in Blue River region, the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect, Feng Yin Taoist master, and his disciple Zhu Shiyao, sat opposite each other in the bamboo room. 2 cups of tea were placed between the two of them. The water vapor in the cup slowly rose, which set off the tranquil and comfortable atmosphere in the bamboo room, if one did not consider the row of Heavenly Sword Hall elders who were standing in the bamboo room. After a long time, Feng Yin, who was somewhat uncomfortable being stared at by his junior brother and sister, finally opened his mouth to break the silence. Tell us in detail about your experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region. Okay. Zhu Shiyao, who has never been good at talking, calmly agreed. Then the woman suddenly stood up and made a sword move. Her movement was as smooth as flowing water. The bamboo room suddenly lit up with starry light. Countless sharp sword chi stabbed toward the sect leader. The sharp sword intent seemed like it wanted to cut him into pieces. However, how could a deity stage cultivator be easily hurt by it? The starry sword chi hit the sect leader's body, bursting out dazzling sparks. However, it couldn't even hurt the sect leader's clothes and skin. The sect leader's expression remained unchanged. He picked up the teacup and slightly nodded. So that's how it is. It's indeed an unexpected result. With that, Feng Yin fell into contemplation. As for Zhu Shiyao, she took a deep breath and then calmly sat back, picked up the teacup and gently sipped the tea. The bamboo room was restored to its tranquility. After a long time. What the hell, you two can speak human language? Standing on the side, the fifth elder finally could not bear it anymore. She took a few steps forward and slapped the wooden table. Are you showing off your foreign language skills? Feng Yin Taoist master was startled, and then apologetically said, I forgot that you don't understand sword language. For Feng Yin and Zhu Shiyao, the most convenient way to communicate was with the sword. There were thousands of words in the heart, but they didn't need to resort to the mouth. When the sword was swung, all the thoughts were poured into it. Could be said that it was convenient and fast. Moreover, it was also in line with the identity of a sword cultivator. However, to be able to communicate through the sword intent, one must have a sharp enough sword sense, which meant that one's talent in the way of the sword must be at the peak. And among the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, not everyone could meet this condition. In that case, let me briefly explain Yao Er's experience and my own analysis. Feng Yin Taoist master put down the teacup and pondered for a moment. Yao Er's experience was very simple. While the others entered the sword catacomb through the main entrance and fought their way through, Yao Er found a small path and directly entered the treasure room to retrieve the ancient sword. Then she swaggered off. What kind of godly development is this? The fifth elder was simply inexplicably shocked. After going through the war, separation, parents making things difficult for you and other hardships, you finally got married to your childhood sweetheart of 20 years, only to find out that she was pregnant with someone else's child when you entered the bridal chamber? If you must use this kind of vulgar explanation, then it's like this. Feng Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He then shook his head and said, therefore the 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect allied forces that went through untold hardships to break into the treasure room tried to intercept Yao Er in a flustered and exasperated manner. Unfortunately, Yao Er had just finished refining the ancient sword, and her sword momentum was at its peak. Although they had a large number of people, they were already exhausted after passing through 3 levels. Moreover, the fire in their heart was too exuberant, so they lost their calm state of mind. Under Yao Er's sword, they were full of flaws. Not being able to catch the adulterer, they were beaten instead, really inhumane. The fifth elder gloated. The youngest among them, Hua Yun, asked, will there be any trouble? After all, they have suffered a big loss. Feng Yin said, the exploration of the sword catacomb depends on one's own chance. Yao Er didn't use any despicable tricks. It can only be said that everyone has their own chance. The sword catacomb in the Southern Heaven region is the tomb of inheritance from ancient times. This time, it came into being because it sensed the change in the world's providence and resuscitation from the void to find a suitable successor. This kind of inheritance tomb usually has 2 kinds of methods, similar to our immortal cultivation sect's disciple recruitment. The first kind is to meet the rigid standards, age, plasticity, cultivation philosophy, that is, to pass through many tests. As long as one can pass the test, they can take the corresponding treasure. The second kind is to have a predestined relationship with the treasure in the tomb and get the direct recognition of the treasure. This way they can skip all the tests and directly take the treasure. The first kind is actually a necessary supplement to the second kind. If the sword catacomb can't find a particularly suitable object that can directly pass the inheritance, the regular test will be opened and the participants will pass through the test. Feng He said, is this the difference between the immortal gathering and the elder's legacy? Wang Wu said with a smile, that is to say, if you can't find a suitable person in free love, then you have to obediently go on a blind date. In short, the reason why Yao can go straight in, avoid all the tests and directly take the ancient sword, is because the ancient sword spirit thinks that Yao is a predestined person, so it opened the back door of the sword catacomb for her. Otherwise, no matter how good Yao's stellar sword scripture is, it is impossible to violate the rules of the sword catacomb. Lucien was quite pleased and nodded to Zhu Shi Yao, so that's how it is. I really congratulate Yao for obtaining this immortal fate. Lu Li frowned. Senior brother, there is a problem here. If Yao and the ancient sword are predestined, then why did the sword catacomb open the normal test procedure and let other cultivators enter the tomb? The other elders were taken aback. Feng Yin's face also sank and said seriously, this is the problem I want to talk about next. The size of the sword catacomb is much larger than expected. This is an unprecedented ancient ruin, which is probably left by a true immortal before the age of chaos. The ancient sword that Yao took is only the outer treasure, which is not worth mentioning compared to the core treasure in the deeper part. So even if Yao takes the ancient sword, it will not affect the normal operation of the sword catacomb. The Heavenly Sword Hall elders were extremely shocked. Lucien's voice trembled as he said in disbelief, the inheritance of a true immortal? In this era there is still the inheritance of a true immortal? Don't tell me the age of chaos didn't make them all disappear? This is a big academic discovery. The fifth elder scolded, academic my ass. This is money. Lu Li also rarely nodded in agreement with the fifth sister's point of view. Yes, if the top-rank spiritual treasure is only the outer treasure, then most likely it is the inheritance of a true immortal. There must be an immortal weapon inside, most likely a true immortal weapon. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's priceless. Moreover, it's in Xingjing Immortal City. The value of such a sword catacomb is comparable to that of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. But senior brother, is this news true? Feng Yin said, when Yao communicated with the ancient sword spirit, at least the deeper existence has been confirmed. Unfortunately, the sword spirit has been sleeping for nearly 10,000 years, so she has lost too much of her memory. Moreover, she was sealed not long after she was born, so she knows very little. Otherwise, with the ancient sword in Yao's hand, our Lingjian school has an incomparable advantage. Wang Wu sneered. But other people may not know this. I'm afraid at this time, Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect are gnashing their teeth in envy and jealousy. Feng Yin disagreed. This kind of sword catacomb even Xingjing Sect alone can't handle it. Several sects cooperating is inevitable. Moreover, once we gain something from the sword catacomb, our information advantage will be wiped out. Therefore there's no need to have such a strong hostility. I estimate that it won't be long before the documents from 10,000 Arts Sect and Kunlun Immortal Sect arrive. At that time we need to take it seriously. The several elders had their own ideas, but this kind of big matter was naturally decided by the sect leader. Senior brother, what are you going to do? Feng Yin said, there are 2 sets of plans. The first is to use the entire sect to develop the sword catacomb. The rule of the sword catacomb is to find young, malleable cultivators to inherit the legacy. In ancient times, the surrounding spiritual energy is rich, so the heart standard is much higher than now. In Lingjian school, I'm afraid only Yao, Wang Lu, and Lu Li, these few people are qualified to participate. Therefore, the 3 of them naturally have to take action. Other suitable candidates can also participate. At the same time, us old guys can't just sit around. Although the sword catacomb won't let us in, we can support Yao, and the others from outside the sword catacomb in all aspects. As a last resort, we can even break the sword catacomb. The advantage of this plan is that the risk is relatively small. Regardless of the rules of the sword catacomb, it is, after all, a dead thing from 10,000 years ago. With the cooperation of the 3 sects elders, the risk is always lower than letting Yao, and the other disciples explore on their own. However, the problem is, once the elders make their move, this matter will inevitably shock the world, and there will no longer be any possibility of keeping it a secret. When the time comes, once the Xingjing sect is alarmed, I believe the other 2 sects don't want to see Xingjing sect being the only one. Therefore, the development of the matter is more likely to be the second plan. Feng Yin paused, swept his eyes around, and then said with a sinking voice, fully trust our successor disciples and let them act alone. We, the old guys, will never participate. At the same time, we will also not allow any other old guys from the other sects to intervene. As long as our 3 sects insist that this is the cultivation of the younger generation disciples, even Xingjing sect would not be able to intervene. In this way, no matter how much the harvest is, it will be divided equally among the three sections. I believe Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Art Sect would also be inclined to this plan. Huayun was somewhat worried. Wouldn't it be too risky if it's just the few of them? After all, this is the sword catacomb from 10,000 years ago, and it has also experienced the Age of Chaos. Even if the intention of the predecessors is to select the successor, they won't kill them. However, in case there's a change in the array inside, their cultivation base is after all too low. Feng Yin said, therefore we can also have the third plan. We can pretend that this thing never happened. Huayun was suddenly at a loss for words. Among the present elders, only Huayun hasn't really experienced the tragedy of 100 years ago. Therefore she was also the soft-hearted one. No matter what the other elders thought, they never thought of giving up this opportunity. Even if behind this opportunity was a huge crisis. If it was other disciples, then it would be fine. However, since they were the successor disciples, carrying the legacy and future of the Lingjian school, and even shouldering the mission of being the mainstay of the Great Era, they were doomed to not grow up in the gentle breeze and drizzle. The ancient sword catacomb was indeed full of crises, but compared to the growth process of the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, what were these tribulations? Not to mention that the sword catacomb was full of opportunities. Not to mention the Lingjian school had Wang Lu, this big killer weapon. Chapter 229. In fact, in addition to Huayun's doubts, when the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall learned that the ancient sword tomb was the inheritance of a true immortal, they basically established the general direction. As the sect leader, Feng Yin had the power to make a decision. It was just that, usually he almost never used it. He always discussed with his junior brothers and sisters before making a decision. However, when Feng Yin already had his own idea, the other elders rarely expressed their objection. It was not that they were afraid of authority. The deep affection between the 10 elders of Heavenly Sword Hall was far beyond the imagination of ordinary cultivators. Power and interest were meaningless to them. The other elders supported Feng Yin because, as the great elder and the sect leader, he had the vision and wisdom to protect the sect for more than 100 years. After a moment of silence, the reward giver elder, whose status was second only to the sect leader, saw that there was no problem, so he further set the tone. Then let's go with the second plan. Let Yao Er and the others take this opportunity to exercise, and also see what level the elite disciples of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect are. I heard that the lead disciple of 10,000 Arts Sect, Zhan Zai, has successfully comprehended the 10,000 motionless immortal heart, and his strength has surpassed Lu Li Zhou Mumu of Kunlun Sect is similar to him. They are all formidable opponents that the next generation disciples can't underestimate. Zhou Ming also sighed with emotion. I originally thought that little Lu Li, who accompanied Wang Lu to experience the immortal fate in Cloud Region, would be ahead of her peers in cultivation base. Unexpectedly, she just barely caught up with the progress of others. This generation is really amazing. Lu Xian said, luck is not something that can be envied, and Lingjian School's advantage can only be reflected after reaching the Taoist master stage. In short, this time the three sects will jointly explore the ancient sword tomb. Presumably they will go all out. There will be cooperation and competition between them. Compared to Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, although Yao Er and Wang Lu each have their own strengths, they are after all weak. At the current stage of immortal cultivation, we can only send out 3 successor disciples and a few other people. However, Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect should have no problem forming a team of 10 people. Therefore, in these few days, us old guys shouldn't be idle. Whatever means and treasures we have, we should use them. No matter which peak they are from, they are all successor disciples of Spirit Sword Sect, so there's nothing to hide. Wang Wu strongly supported this. Well said. Strong support. Recently, Wang Lu has been cultivating the great art of shapeless metal dissipation. He needs 100,000 spirit stones every day to make any progress. I sincerely ask for your support. The sect leader said softly, such an evil cultivation method, just tell him not to cultivate it. Hey, aren't you going to give your full support? Yeah. Feng Yin coldly said, therefore we are also considering whether we should change him to a more reliable master. In any case, his non-phase method has already reached a certain level, so he can continue to practice without you. *CK, you guys can't abandon me like this. After eliminating the interference of the 5th elder, the rest of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall decided on the scope of their contributions. Some contributed their unique magical treasures, some contributed their elixirs, and some were willing to pass on their skills to their disciples so that their cultivation could temporarily increase. In the end, even Wang Wu solemnly declared that she would teach Wang Lu a new set of cultivation techniques. Although it was a benefit for their own disciple, the rest of the elders had no objection. In fact, the biggest task given to Wang Wu by the Lingjian school was to train Wang Lu well. At the end of the discussion, Lu Xian said, "The preliminary preparation work has been set. The next step is to draw up a preliminary plan of action. Although the specific details have to wait until we communicate with Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect, we still need to have a basic idea. We should let Wang Lu lead the team. Although in terms of strength, Yao Er is obviously above him, and little Lu Li can also make great progress after a short period of training, but in the process of exploring the Sword Tomb, Wang Lu's strategic ability is undoubtedly the most important." Fang He questioned, "That's true. After the experiential learning in the Grand Cloud Mountain, I also recognize his talent as a team leader. But now only little Lu Li is convinced by him. He and Yao Er haven't established enough trust." Several elders turned to look at Zhu Shiyao. The woman looked indifferent, still sitting at the wooden table in the bamboo room. Her slender hand stroked the sword and her eyes were like stars. The elders felt a bit of a headache. Zhu Shiyao's temperament was too cold and even too arrogant. In addition to the way of the sword, she didn't care about anything else. If one wanted to get her approval, they had to prove their strength and talent. And in the entire Spirit Sword Mountain, only the sect leader Feng Yin could use his peerless sword to suppress her. If it were other people such as Lu Xian and Fang He, although they were also the most authoritative elders, and their cultivation base was far above the current Zhu Shiyao, it was impossible for them to casually instruct Zhu Shiyao to do the work that she hated. As for Wang Lu, previously when Zhu Shiyao returned to the mountain and used her extreme divergent sword language to frighten the disciples of Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Lu also found it difficult to resist and had to take half a step back, which made it impossible for Zhu Shiyao to be convinced. After a moment of silence, Wang Wu sneered, "You bunch of idiots, your brains are really rigid and rotten. Isn't it easy to be disobedient? No matter how indifferent Zhu Shiyao is, she's still a woman. If a woman is disobedient, then *ck her until she is obedient. No matter how tough a woman is, the man who enters her body will be particularly weak." Inside the bamboo room there was a deathly silence. The temperature even plummeted and a thin layer of frost and cold mist rose. Wang Wu, however, seemed to be unaware of it as she continued, "In the next few days, I will design a set of non-phase diamond pestle for Wang Lu. I guarantee that after he practices it, he will become twice as powerful and unyielding, bringing the hard characteristic of the non-phase method to the extreme, making Zhu Shiyao obedient and obedient." The sect leader softly opened his mouth. His voice trembled, no, his whole body was gently trembling. Wang Wu said with a smile, "Rest assured, senior brother, when the method is perfected, I will also teach you to practice it. I guarantee that you will be like an old tree blooming, like the setting sun falling red." "You shut your mouth. These filthy words are simply unimaginable. From today on, for the next 3 years, you will no longer have any offerings." Wang Wu, as if struck by a bolt from the blue, was flabbergasted. "What?" Then she quickly turned around to ask for help. "Brothers, help me." Even Hua Yun, who had a good relationship with her, couldn't stand it anymore. "Senior sister, you are short of money recently. Every time you are short of money you lose your moral integrity." Lu Li also sighed. "Senior sister, I still have some spirit stones, I'll give them to you. You better be a little more reserved." Amidst the quarrel, Zhu Shiyao suddenly stood up. As soon as the woman stood up, the rest of the elders shut their mouths and turned their attention to her. After Zhu Shiyao got up, her willowy eyebrows slightly wrinkled and her cherry lips opened and closed, as if there was something stuck in her throat. She was not good with words. Although she had an idea in her heart, it was difficult for her to say it out loud. Therefore she resorted to the sword. She casually waved the top-grade spiritual treasure ancient sword from the ancient sword tomb, which turned into a mass of starry sword chi that diffused in all directions. Everyone present could feel Zhu Shiyao's firm will from this bitingly cold sword intent, and for a while they were silent. Zhu Shiyao had made up her mind. As soon as she waved her sword, she floated away, leaving the bamboo room cold and lonely. What did Yao Er say just now?" Wang Wu was puzzled and had to ask for help from others. Several elders looked embarrassed. In the end, Fang He coldly snorted. "She said that she will never team up with Wang Lu, let alone listen to his instructions. In the ancient sword tomb she wants to go alone." Wang Wu was dumbfounded. This, at such a young age, she is determined to be a leftover woman, why bother? You have the king face to ask? After a long silence, the sect leader finally spoke. Actually, this is also good. Yao is proud and arrogant, so she wants to knead her into Wang Lu's team. Not only will it be difficult for the two of them to cooperate tacitly, but it will also cause internal friction for no reason. Moreover, strictly speaking, Yao has been under my tutelage for nearly 20 years, and Wang Lu has also been on the mountain for more than 10 years. I think we might as well take a look at the so-called chosen one in the stellar diffraction technique or the reincarnated sword god that I personally selected. Which side is stronger? It's good for the disciples of the Lingjian school to get along with each other, but we also need to strengthen the internal competition, especially for Wang Lu. He has talent, and his cultivation progress is also quite good. However, compared to Yao, his motivation to cultivate is still lacking, so we might as well give him more pressure. As for Yao, she has the ancient sword to protect her, so she can protect herself by herself. With that, the sect leader seemingly unintentionally glanced at his junior sister. Sure enough, he saw that she looked relaxed, with a heartless and joyous look. This guy, are you addicted to playing the bad guy? The documents from 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect were sent to Spirit Sword Mountain a day later. As expected by Feng Yin, the two sects put forward a strict confidentiality proposal to let their disciples act alone. Obviously, they didn't want this matter to be made public, lest a long night brings many dreams. The Southern Heaven region was too remote for the three sects, beyond their reach. Of course, with the strength of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, if they had to fight across the region, the local sects such as Beastmaster School and the others in the Southern Heaven region would still not be able to resist. The problem was, with the continent-wide strategy of Xingjing sect, the situation had become delicate. As the head of the 5 uniques, Xingjing sect's comprehensive strength could almost be seen as the sum of the other 3 sections. Although this behemoth was bloated, if it really wanted to oppress others, only the dead barbarians of the Royal Soldier sect could go head-on against it. Therefore, the best way was to bypass Xingjing sect, which required a high degree of secrecy. The news about the Lingjian school was limited to the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, Zhu Shiyao and Wang Lu, the 2 successor disciples. Even Lu Li was temporarily concealed. Only the sect leader, several elders and several elite disciples of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect knew about it. Things might not necessarily be kept secret until the last moment, but a little bit more was a little bit more. As for the method of cooperation between the 3 sects, after 1 or 2 rounds of rapid and efficient negotiation, a tentative framework was set. The disciples of the 3 sects must take the Big Heart Demon Oath to bind each other not to harm each other. As for how to team up after entering the Sword Tomb, there was no clear requirement. After all, the situation in the deeper part of the Sword Tomb was still unknown, so it was meaningless to set too much detail. In order to show their sincerity, each of the 3 sects came up with a number of valuable spiritual objects, most of which were used to crack the mechanism in the Sword Tomb, or to save their lives. Among them, the 10,000 Arts sect contributed a very unique universal calculation formula, which could be used to quickly calculate the response method in the mechanism array. Kunlun sect contributed a set of ancient books, which recorded the various experiences of the predecessors in exploring the remains of true immortals, all of which were priceless. For this reason, the Lingjian school had quite a headache on how to come up with something of similar value. While the elders of the 3 sects were actively planning for the development of the Sword Tomb, Wang Lu was not idle. The biggest difficulty in this trip to the Sword Tomb was the heavy test left by the true immortals. And in the Spirit Sword Mountain, there was an expert who could crack no matter how complicated the mechanism was. Lady Boss, I want a takeout. Chapter 230. Wang Lu had always prided himself as a professional adventurer, and one of the main business of a professional adventurer was to solve all kinds of puzzles. The ancient Sword Tomb trial was naturally within the scope of his business. Just listening to Hai Xiaohai's experience in the Sword Tomb, Wang Lu felt that the 2 teams of 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun Immortal sect were simply innumerable. Even if he was alone, he could do better than their team. But on the other hand, professional adventurers were not omnipotent. If he relied on himself, perhaps it would be difficult to continue until the 3rd level, and he still needed help to continue. Compared to Zhu Shiyao, who easily walked into the treasure room alone, Wang Lu also admitted that at least in terms of the first 3 levels, he was not the best. Moreover, apart from Zhu Shiyao, he dared not say that he was the number 1 in the Spirit Sword Mountain sect in terms of strategy. The lady boss of the Rue family inn in Spirit Creek Town was the real expert. No matter how big the mechanism array was, under the touch of her slender jade-like hands, it would disintegrate into nothingness. Plus, although she looked petite and exquisite, in fact, her iron fist was like a hammer, and her strength was as great as an ox. As long as she pushed all the way, there was no obstacle that she could not pass. Therefore, when it came to the in-depth development of the ancient sword tomb, the first person that came to Wang Lu's mind was the lady boss. "Lady boss, I want a takeout." Pushing open the door of the inn, he saw the lady boss behind the counter was somewhat restlessly tapping her abacus in front of a blank account book. The calculation process was probably 0 plus 0 equals 0. Seeing Wang Lu came in, the lady boss put down her abacus, raised her eyelids and said, "Why don't you hurry to prepare for the experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region? Why are you wasting your time here? Why do you want takeout?" Wang Lu said with a sinking voice, "I want a pair of white-cut pig's trotters that can break all kinds of methods." The lady boss picked up the wine jar and smashed it. "Don't be so grumpy, I'm very sincere in asking for help." The lady boss glanced at him. "I told you, my ability is only the most effective in the Spirit Sword Mountain, and the furthest I can go is the Blue River region. I can't do anything in the Southern Heaven region." Wang Lu explained, "The main body of the Sword Tomb is not in the Southern Heaven region. The Southern Heaven region is just an entrance that was accidentally discovered. It exists in an unknown space where the Sword Tomb and 9 regions meet." The lady boss said, "My main body isn't in the Tianan, but it's not in the Blue River region either. Once I cross the boundary, I won't be able to display my abilities, but if that thing escapes, can you bear the responsibility?" Wang Lu said, "That's why I don't dare to hope that you'll personally accompany me, Sister Ling. However, do you have any way to make your ability portable? For example, is it possible for your undergarments to inherit the effects of your ability? Pervert, die." Wait, Sister Ling, this is based on academic research." Jokes aside, when Wang Lu saw Feng Ling's attitude, he knew that his dreams had been shattered. There were no shortcuts to the development of Tianan Sword Tomb. Of course, he should have thought that if Feng Ling was so useful, even if the sect leader had to kneel and lick her boots, he would still use her power. He just considered that their relationship was bad, and perhaps Feng Ling was deliberately standing by, but now it seemed that this was not the case. However, he was just trying his luck. Sister Ling's undergarments. No, he couldn't get a portable item to break through the barrier, so it would be good to have a portion of sliced pig's trotters as a sumptuous meal. However, just when Wang Lu gave up, the lady boss slightly hesitated and said, "This time the exploration of the ancient sword tomb is very risky. I see that there are quite a lot of disputes among the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, so don't be too careless. I have a treasure here which was given to me by old man Feng. It can save my life at a critical moment. I think you might be able to use it." With that, the lady boss took out an orange jade tablet from her bosom and directly stuffed it into Wang Lu's hand. "When you need it, just crush it. Unless it's a life and death situation, don't use it carelessly. If you don't have any use for it, that's for the best. Remember to return it to me when you come back." Wang Lu only felt a warmth in his hand, and the jade tablet that had the warmth of a young girl fell into his hand without any hesitation. Without waiting for him to speak, the lady boss turned around and went to the kitchen. Since her signal to send him off was so obvious, even though Wang Lu was a little puzzled, he still left the Rue family inn. However, as he held the jade tablet given by the lady boss, a question involuntarily appeared in his mind. Because of Feng Ling's constitution, she rarely touched any spiritual objects, because it was very likely that she would destroy the treasure with just a light touch. During the immortal gathering, when she gave him the fresh-keeping food container, she had placed a handkerchief on it. But now she directly took off the jade tablet. Was she not afraid of damaging the spiritual object? Wang Lu observed it curiously. The spiritual energy in the jade tablet was restrained, and it was sealed with a unique method. Unless he really crushed it, he would not be able to determine its specific effects. After saying goodbye to the Rue family inn, his second stop was Misty Peak's cafeteria. "Oh, Wang Lu, it's you. I heard that you're going to a very dangerous place to train?" "That's right." A qualified swordsman should continuously challenge themselves in dangerous situations and sharpen their swords. "Wait a moment, I have something for you." While speaking, Aya did not allow him to say anything else. She quickly took out a large package. "This is the military rations I specially prepared for you. It's a special product of Blue Sky Peak, so it's very nutritious." Wang Lu was silent for a while, but he accepted it for the time being. He thought that when he needed to use poison he would at least have the raw materials. After giving away her sincerity, Aya felt carefree. Then is there anything else? Wang Lu said, I want to spar with you with the sword again. It has indeed been a long time since we've sparred with the sword. You've grown a lot during this period of time, so let me see your new skills. As he spoke, his dark green eyes shone with an aggressive light. In the last sparring session with Aya, as expected, he was once again defeated. Similarly, as expected, he had a new understanding. This chef of the Misty Peak could be said to be one of the most mysterious people in Spirit Sword Mountain. Seemingly without the least bit of immortal method, she was just a mortal with good swordsmanship. However, with his current Shudan stage strength, Wang Lu still could not win against her. Aya's swordsmanship was like a never-ending towering peak. The stronger she was, the stronger she became, making it impossible for people to guess where her limit was. However, the reason why Wang Lu sparred with her was not to win, but to sharpen his sword edge. Sparring with Aya before the expedition was like using a good whetstone to sharpen himself, sharpening all the immature details of his swordsmanship, making his non-phase sword more rounded. Sharpening his sword at any time, after all, would have some effect. A day later, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall began to summon the successor disciples to the Stellar Peak. Wang Lu bid farewell to Aya and, with the latter's blessing, stepped on the transmission array and arrived at the Stellar Peak. In front of the sect leader's bamboo room on the Stellar Peak, Lu Li had already arrived ahead of time. She was leaning against a few bamboos, holding a bag of nuts and tasting them. However, when she saw Wang Lu, she threw away the nuts, cheerfully jumped over, hugged Wang Lu, and said with a silly smile, Master told me to listen to you. Then let's shake hands. Oh. Sit down. Oh. Stand up. Oh. Wang Lu touched Lu Li's head and was about to praise her when he suddenly found out that not far away, several pairs of sharp sword-like eyes were firmly locked on him. Second Elder Lu Xian, Third Elder Fang He, Fourth Elder Zhou Ming. Almost all the Heavenly Sword Hall elders were gathered here, coldly watching his pet teasing behavior. Wang Lu coughed and tried to explain, just now we prepared to perform a skit for everyone at the annual meeting. It's called. Shimin Qing skillfully plays Snoopy, please correct me. Humph. Zhou Ming coldly humphed and turned his head away. Most of the other elders were also indifferent. Only his master fiercely gave him a thumbs up and secretly said through primordial spirit, Brat, good job, Brilliant Peak is very rich. You have to stabilize this money tree for me. Stabilize your grandpa, Wang Lu. While he was feeling awkward, the sect leader faintly opened his mouth. Yes. This time you will lead the team to the ancient sword tomb. You are born smart and you have experienced a lot of things in the past 10 years. I don't need to say anything unnecessary, but I still want to emphasize that you are the lead disciple of the sect. This is not only a right but also an obligation. Wang Lu sternly said, I understand. I will certainly take good care of junior sister Lu Li and senior sister Shi Yao. I will not disappoint other people's trust in me. Feng Yin shook his head. It's good to have such determination, but there's still one thing wrong. Yao Er will not be in the same team as you. She will be alone. Wang Lu was taken aback. His eyes turned to the bamboo room. A tall woman quietly stood in the shadow of the bamboo room's corner. She was aloof from the world, but her arrogant posture was also undeniable. Interesting, does she look down on us, a group of burdens? Wang Lu smiled. Then let's wait and see. Let's see who is better, this god of hoodlums or me, this professional adventurer. Feng Yin also said, but in addition to Lu Li, you still have other team members to take care of. Shirshan, come. Yes. Along with the soft voice of a woman, the air on the stellar peak suddenly became a bit more refreshing. A white figure slowly walked out from the bamboo forest. With a faint smile, Bai Shirshan walked to the front of the bamboo room, nodded to the Heavenly Sword Hall elders one by one, and then smiled at Wang Lu. Senior brother. Wang Lu, long time no see. Wang Lu suddenly understood. Indeed, long time no see. In a blink of an eye, you seem to have grown up. More than a month ago, Bai Shirshan was brought back to the Clear Sky Peak by the seventh elder for closed-door training. Now that they met again, Bai Shirshan still maintained her slightly immature and childish appearance, but her expression was calm and composed. She was no longer the simple immortal beast that could be deceived by a bone. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Bai Shirshan and Lu Li were, after all, different. In this more than a month at the Clear Sky Peak, Bai Shirshuan's harvest was obviously not only the healing of her internal injuries, but she also learned a lot of common sense from Uncle Guanhai. Now, Bai Shirshan was still pure and natural, but she appeared to be a lot more mature. Only, deep in her eyes, there was still a trace of affection that could only be opened to him. Shixian is an immortal beast with innate magical ability. With her help, I believe we can be like a tiger that has grown wings. With that, the sect leader flipped his palm, and the stellar peak suddenly glowed with starlight. Since everyone is here, no need to waste time. You guys go ahead. According to the agreement between Lingjian School, Kunlun Sect, and 10,000 Arts Sect, in order to keep it a secret, when the time came, the three sects would each open the transmission portal to the treasure room of the Sword Tomb and then converge inside the Sword Tomb. Among them, at the end of the experiential learning, the disciples of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect had left a transmission mark in the treasure room. Although Zhu Shiyao didn't remember to leave the mark, the mysterious underworld ancient sword in her hand could directly resonate with the Sword Tomb. In this way they could avoid the eyes and ears of other sections. Under the instruction of the sect leader, Zhu Shiyao, Wang Lu, Lu Li by Shixian, the four people representing Lingjian School stepped into the sea of starlight, feeling the turbulence of space, ready to meet the new test. Feng Yin controlled the array, tearing the space with his deity stage cultivation base, and his magical power pierced through the void, going straight to the unnamed space where the Sword Tomb was located. On the stellar peak, the reward giver elder couldn't help but give his last exhortation. In this trip, our Lingjian School has the least number of people, but you must show the style of Lingjian School, neither servile nor overbearing. Of course, the three sects still focus on cooperation. Don't be too confrontational so as to spoil the important matter. In short, the nagging voice hasn't stopped yet. Along with Feng Yin Taoist Master's command, the scenery in front of Wang Lu and the others suddenly distorted, and in the blink of an eye, everything turned gray. According to the plan, after the transmission was launched, they would stop at the treasure room of the ancient Sword Tomb. There, Wang Lu and the others would meet up with the people of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect to dig deeper secrets of the Sword Tomb. It was just that. Wang Lu frowned, inwardly puzzled. Previously, no one said that there were so many people from Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, right? Looking at the huge team of more than 30 people, as well as the fluctuation of magical power that was very different from that of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, Wang Lu's heart slightly sank. The trip to the Sword Tomb had just begun, but the situation seemed to have developed in an uncontrollable direction. Chapter 231. The treasure room of the Sword Tomb was relatively spacious, but at this time with more than 30 to 40 people squeezed in, it seemed a bit cramped and the atmosphere was quite subtle. When Wang Lu and the others appeared from the transmission array, they immediately attracted everyone's attention, just like pouring cold water into a hot pan. Who are they? Again. Hurry up and tell them to get out of here, this group of trash. The noise of life made Wang Lu frown. This kind of chaos was not in line with any plan. However, there was a way to deal with the unplanned situation. As long as he didn't change, there was nothing to be afraid of. Calming himself down, Wang Lu swept his eyes around. Among the large group of unfamiliar faces, he also found a few familiar faces. The other side of course also discovered Wang Lu. After a moment of hesitation they came over. Brother Wang. A slight smile hung on Wang Lu's face. Little hi, there's also Brother Zai over there, long time no see. These people were the disciples of the 10,000 Arts Sect, led by their eldest brother Zhan Zai. In the past, when the two sects met, Yi Feifei Zhao Jiangyuan, and the others were also present. Behind them were two people with similar age and cultivation base. Obviously, they were also the elite disciples of the 10,000 Arts Sect. What's going on here? Hai Yunfan wryly smiled. Man proposes but God disposes. For a disciple of the 10,000 Arts Sect to say this, it seemed like a great change had happened. Moreover, it was a change that was difficult to deal with. Combined with the situation at the scene, Wang Lu thought for a moment and then said, Shengjing Sect? Although he didn't understand why the strictly confidential operation would be interrupted by the Shengjing Sect, but to be able to make the calculation of the three sects fail, to make the Feng Yin Taoist master unable to deduce it, and to make the disciples of the 10,000 Arts Sect, one of the five uniques, feel deeply helpless. No matter how he thought about it, only the Shengjing Sect could meet this condition. Yes, it's the Shengjing Sect. A vigorous and powerful voice suddenly came in, and then a tall male cultivator separated from the crowd and walked to the front of Wang Lu, covering him in his shadow. Wang Lu's talent could be considered above average, but in front of this person he was like an underdeveloped child. If one were to look at him at eye level, they would only be able to see his chest. Then, without raising his head, Wang Lu stared at the other party's chest and said, "Fellow Taoist from Shengjing? Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, esteemed guest." Although the cultivators of Shengjing sect were tall, they were not reckless people. How could they not understand the implication of Wang Lu's words, which was that they were uninvited guests? However, he didn't care about the implied words and snorted coldly, "You're from Lingjin school? I have nothing to say to you. Go back to where you came from and stop being a hindrance here." Wang Lu lightly said, "Turtle dove occupying magpie's nest, is this your Shengjing sect's way of doing things? A dove occupying a magpie's nest? Ridiculous, since when did ownerless things become your family's things?" Hearing this remark, Wang Lu suddenly laughed and then looked up. "Since you also admit that it's ownerless things, then at least it's not considered as Shengjing sects. Let's put aside our dispute and jointly develop it. As for exploring the depths of the sword tomb, it's up to our own chance. That's not bad." What a glib tongue. The tall cultivator sneered a few times but didn't speak again. His condescending eyes revealed a trace of appreciation. Different from Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect and Zhan Zai of 10,000 Arts sect, the young cultivator from Blue River region, his words were more shrewd and more pragmatic. When they first met the people from Kunlun sect, the two sects almost fought. Zhou Mumu, the leader of Kunlun sect, didn't expect to meet Shengjing sect cultivators here. Surprised, she didn't hesitate to spew venomous slander, slandering Shengjing sect for using a despicable trick to steal the secret of the three sections. Later, when the people from 10,000 Arts sect arrived, they were also surprised. However, Zhan Zai was a bit calmer than Zhou Mumu. He guessed the inside story and didn't directly accuse Shengjing sect people of using despicable tricks. Instead, he emphasized that the sword tomb belonged to the three sects, Kunlun sect, 10,000 Arts sect and Spirit Sword sect, and Shengjing sect had no right to interfere. That's all fart. Despicable trick to steal the secret of the three sects? If Shengjing sect wanted to know, why would they need to steal your information? They were really short-sighted, looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Shengjing sect spread their influence all over the 9 regions, not just for the immediate benefit. The 9-region strategy has been implemented for more than 1,000 years, but Shengjing sect actually didn't really do much plundering. They just deeply engraved the mark of Shengjing sect in every part of the 9 regions. Later, the sect leader Hichu Daoren spent 100 years to build the Immortal Treasure 9 Regions map in Shengjing Immortal City, which connected the geography of the 9 regions. From then on, all the major events in the world were under his control. Therefore, how could Shengjing sect not know about the appearance of the ancient sword tomb in the Southern Heaven region? Of course, even if it was the Immortal Treasure 9 Regions map, it was impossible to calculate all the changes in the world. It could only perceive the major events, but the details were vague. And in the area where Shengjing sect's power was slightly inferior, the 9 regions map's response was relatively insensitive. Plus, the 9 regions was so big that changes were happening all the time. No matter how powerful Shengjing sect was, it was difficult for them to take all of them into account. For example, the news about the birth of the immortal beast on the Grand Cloud Mountain in the Grand Cloud Mountain was vague on the 9 regions map, so it didn't attract enough attention. Later, when the Immortal Treasure map issued a warning, Bai Shixian had already completed her transformation, and the 5th Elder of Spirit Sword Mountain personally went to the Grand Cloud Mountain. Thus Shengjing sect had to give up. As for the ancient sword tomb in the Southern Heaven region, Shengjing sect also misjudged it. They mistakenly thought that there were, at most, 1 or 2 high-rank spiritual treasures in the sword tomb, which was not worth spending too much manpower and material resources. At that time, there were already 3 sects from the 5 uniques competing for it, so there was no need for Shengjing sect to forcefully intervene. However, when the Lingjian school disciples took away the treasure, Shengjing sect discovered the abnormality. In the 9 regions map, the symbol of the birth of the rare treasure in the Southern Heaven region not only didn't disperse, but instead, it vaguely showed a stronger tendency. It was just that, indistinct and intermittent. The sect leader calculated with his supreme divination technique and determined that there might be a secret in the depths of the sword tomb. It was just that, as an inheritance tomb, it was not suitable to break it with brute force. Thus, he immediately ordered the elite disciples of the Immortal sect to form a team to explore it. The reaction of Shengjing sect was actually a bit slower than that of the other 3 sections. However, the extraordinariness of this leader of the Immortal sect was without a doubt. Although it started late, its unique internal management model allowed it to complete the organization mobilization in the first instance. From the central region Immortal City as well as its various branches, It gathered a 25-people team and directly rushed to the entrance of the Sword Tomb. They didn't have the transmission mark left by Kunlun Immortal Sect's 10,000 Arts Sect and the others, so they started from the beginning. The first 3 passes only took them half a day to completely break through, which was an exceptionally amazing efficiency. Of course, this was normal for the people of Xingjing Sect. Although these 25 people were hastily assembled, they were the elites of the Immortal Sect, absolutely not mediocre. The leader was the 7th of the 19 successor disciples of the Immortal Sect, Power King Jianglu, who was at the peak of Shudan stage. His mysterious gold unbreakable body had reached the 16th layer, and his comprehensive strength was not inferior to the other lead disciples of the 5 uniques. His deputies were the twins Wangyuel Wanyu and Wangyuel Wanyun, who were ranked 70 and 18th among the 19 successor disciples. The 2 of them held the Yin and Yang treasure chest, and when they joined forces, their strength was even a notch higher than Jianglu's. The remaining 20 or so cultivators were also the absolute elites of the Immortal Sect, with the lowest cultivation base being middle-level Shudan. Coupled with their superior cultivation method and magical treasures, their comprehensive strength was not much inferior to that of Taoist Master King Pil of a common high-rank sect. With such a powerful team, why would they need to steal the news of Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect? Relying on their own ability alone was enough to be successful in every endeavor in the Sword Tomb. Uninvited guests, turtledove occupying the magpie's nest? How ridiculous. When their team entered the treasure room and was about to open the entrance of the 4th pass, Kunlun Sect's Zhou Mumu had just arrived. 10,000 Arts Sect's Zhan Zai and the others were nowhere to be seen. The uninvited guests should be the disciples of Kunlun Immortal Sect and the other 2 sects. After realizing this problem, Wang Lu simply didn't entangle himself with the ownership and development of the Sword Tomb. Instead, he directly put forward the argument that they should put aside the dispute, avoiding the disadvantage. From a reasonable point of view, this argument was the most difficult to refute. Because although Xingjing Sect was the first to arrive, compared to the other 3 sects, they had, after all, lost the initiative. Thus, it was completely unclear who the right to develop the Sword Tomb belonged to. And how to deal with this unclear issue? It was very simple. One was Wang Lu's proposal to put aside the dispute and focus on developing the treasure of the Sword Tomb first. The other was, "What a joke, who wants to put aside the dispute with you?" From the Xingjing Sect team, a tall and thin cultivator sneered. "Do you think you can compete with Xingjing Sect for the treasure of the Sword Tomb?" However, before Wang Lu could speak, a heroic young girl from the Kunlun Immortal Sect team furrowed her willowy eyebrows and angrily rebuked, "Wishful thinking? Didn't your sect master teach you first come, first served?" "First come, first served? When I came here you Zhou Mumu were still on the road, yet you have the nerve to talk about first come, first served. Your Kunlun Immortal Sect has always boasted itself as the ancestor of the Immortal Path. How could you not distinguish right from wrong? The last time we came here your Xingjing Sect didn't even know this place." Seeing that the 2 sides were going to talk about the same old thing again, the Xingjing Sect's cultivators didn't say much. More than 20 people simultaneously took a step forward. Under the pressure of their astonishing imposing manner, the 6 people from Kunlun Immortal Sect suddenly looked a bit ugly. No matter how strong their mouth was, they couldn't deny the fact that Xingjing Sect was the strongest among them. Among the 25 people, any one of them was not weak. The imposing manner of the Kunlun Immortal Sect's cultivators was a notch lower. Zhou Mumu hastily turned to look at the 10,000 Arts Sect. Although the 2 sects weren't that close, they after all joined hands last time. Zhan Zai's 10,000 methods comprehension skill had an astonishing strength, so he could be a very powerful support. However, when her eyes turned, Zhou Mumu couldn't help but be stunned. The last time they met, Zhan Zai, who was quite heroic and somewhat bookish, was now like a young man who had his first awakening of love. His face was full of shyness, and from time to time, he would secretly glance at a naked girl from the Lingjian school. Your mother. What the hell are you doing here?" Zhan Zai was unreliable, so Zhou Mumu had to pin her hope on the Lingjian school. Previously, she didn't have much contact with the cultivators of the Lingjian school, but she had long heard of the name of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, Wang Lu. Moreover, in the last trip to the Sword Tomb, she received a sword strike from Zhu Shiyao, which nearly shattered her immortal Tai exquisite body. If the Lingjian school was willing to take the lead, the 3 sects might be able to fight against Xingjing Sect. Allow me to say a few words. While the situation was tense, Wang Lu said, This ancient sword tomb was left behind by a true immortal from the ancient times, and its level is far beyond the present age. Moreover, after experiencing the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos, it's likely that there are quite a number of mechanisms malfunctioning or mutation, making it even more dangerous. Although your sect's team is powerful, I'm afraid it's unrealistic to say that it's like walking on flat ground. Similarly, it's the same for our Spirit Sword sect, Kunlun Immortal sect, and 10,000 Arts sect. So, instead of having internal friction, it's better for us to join hands and explore it. The scale of this sword tomb is unprecedented, and there are countless treasures, so why do we have to eat it alone? Jianglu nodded and said, Xingjing sect doesn't necessarily want to eat it alone. If we can get strong support in the process of exploring the sword tomb, that would naturally be a good thing. However, we're worried that when the time comes, we won't get a helping hand but a dagger from the back. This Power King Jianglu was tall and strong, and his method was firm and fierce, but his mind was calm and meticulous, which was quite inconsistent with his appearance. Wang Lu said with a smile, then let's make the big heart demon oath. However, this time it was the Kunlun sect people who came to undermine them. Seeing that Wang Lu wanted to join hands with Xingjing sect, Zhou Mumu was quite annoyed. Is your Lingjian school so spineless? Seeing Xingjing sect, you can't even stand firm and shamelessly flatter them? Jianglu laughed. See that? Even your three sects are scheming against each other, how can I feel at ease to accept you as my teammates? Moreover, what Brother Wang just said is right, this ancient sword tomb is extremely dangerous, even our Xingjing sect has to be careful. As for your three sects, I won't say that you're just a motley crew, just save your energy and go home early. The 9 regions is vast and there are countless immortal opportunities. Our Xingjing sect doesn't want to eat all the benefits, so if we can't, you guys can freely play to your heart's content. Wang Lu raised his eyebrows. Isn't it clear that you're only giving the leftovers to others? If you guys really have the ability, Xingjing sect welcomes you to compete. Unfortunately, even if your 3 sects join forces, it's still not enough. Wang Lu said that he was waiting for this sentence. However, before he could open his mouth, he heard a stuttering but ice-cold voice behind him. So noisy, so noisy. The next moment, the dazzling starlight sprinkled in every corner of the treasure room. Tens of thousands of cold stars made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. However, once they reached out and touched the starlight, they could feel the astonishing heat bursting out from it. Ice and fire intertwined. Under the illumination of the starlight, this ancient sword tomb vaguely shook. A moment later, a burst of collapsing sound came from a gray wall. The treasure room was actually broken. The passage to the 4th level of the sword tomb also leaked out from behind the wall. While everyone was incomparably shocked, Zhu Shiyao completely ignored the dispute between Xingjing sect and the other 3 sections. Her figure, like a breeze, floated toward the entrance to the 4th level. Wait a minute. The Xingjing sect cultivator who was closest to the wall reacted and reached out to stop her. However, when his 5 fingers opened and closed, the space collapsed and the 5 elements became chaotic, showing his terrifying power. Don't block the way. Bam. The crowd couldn't even see what happened, but the cultivator who reached out to stop her was hit back by an incomparably huge force and flew into the air like a straw. Power King Jianglu stared with eyes wide open, unable to believe what he saw. The person who was sent flying was one of the vice-captains of Xingjing sect, Wangyuel Wanyun. That seemingly ordinary person, but between his palms there was the yin and yang universe, the most unpredictable peak Shudan stage cultivator. After a moment of consternation, Jianglu chased after him in big strides and roared, "Want to run?" The other cultivators of Xingjing sect immediately followed. The 25 people, one after another, poured into the hole in the wall. As for the cultivators of the other 3 sections, Tisk, things are really hard to predict. Come on, what are you waiting for? Let's catch up. Following Wang Lu's call, the cultivators of the other 3 sects immediately followed in silence. Seeing that the previously difficult-to-solve deadlock was so violently broken, everyone's heart had different feelings. Among them, Wang Lu felt it the most. Sure enough, 1,000 words are not as good as a straight stab. Chapter 232. What a frightening stellar sword. What a frightening spirit sword sect people. Running in the gray corridor behind the wall, Power King Jianglu's momentum was like a rainbow. His well-tempered mysterious golden battle body released an astonishing amount of energy, which was unstoppable. However, while running, Jianglu's heart couldn't help but surge with a burst of chill. Just now, when that earth-shaking stellar sword light shone, everything around him seemed to have stagnated, and the world fell into black and white. Only a tall and elegant figure bloomed with her own color, aloof from the world, aloof, disdainful of everything around her. That sword strike was aimed at the wall, and this ancient sword tomb that was built by a true immortal level method was actually broken under the might of that sword strike. Even the 25 people of Xingjing sect couldn't easily open the door to the 4th level, yet it was broken by her sword strike. What if that sword strike was aimed at him? Could the mysterious golden battle body withstand the stellar sword chi? Jianglu had no confidence. When Wangyuan intercepted it with his yin and yang 5 elements divine claw, he was under the protection of the mountain array. It could be said that there were 24 people sharing the damage. Even a Yuanying stage cultivator would find it difficult to injure him. However, in front of that unpredictable stellar sword chi, he unexpectedly couldn't resist even the slightest bit. Jianglu clearly saw that what was broken was not the 25 people's joint defense, but the mountain array. Zhu Shiyao's marvelous swordsmanship broke the battle array and then defeated Wangyuan, during which her figure didn't stop even for a moment. This kind of method was truly marvelous. Let alone her Shudan stage, even among the Taoist masters of King Pil, very few people could do this. Therefore, this was also the reason why Jianglu immediately led everyone to rush into the 4th level, regardless of the other 3 sections. Even if they could block the other 3 sects, so what? If they let Zhu Shiyao go in, who knew how far she could go? He heard that before she directly entered the treasure room on the 3rd level, which obviously meant that she had a great immortal affinity. It was very likely that she was recognized as the successor of the inheritance tomb. Therefore, no matter who went in, they couldn't let her go. As for the division of forces, it was even more foolish. Xingjing sect's team was indeed the strongest, but the other 3 sects were absolutely not weak. If they joined forces, their strength would actually be similar to the 25-people team of Xingjing sect. Once they divided their forces, the consequences would be difficult to predict. At this time, perhaps it was as the first seat of Lingjian school Wang Lu had said teaming up was the right choice. Senior brother, what do we do now? Behind her, Wangyuan quickly caught up. He was injured by Zhu Shiyao's sword, and although he was treated by his fellow disciples, his complexion was still somewhat pale. Jianglu said, let's follow them first. As for those 3 sects cultivators, don't worry about them. Since we can't stop them at the checkpoint, there's no need to waste time on internal strife. Yes, I understand. Wangyuan nodded and asked again, Senior brother, I can't sense her aura, are you still locking onto her? Being asked about this matter, Jianglu was silent for a moment, and then said through primordial spirit, not at all. After stepping into the passage, I completely lost the clue. I suspect that the problem lies with the sword catacomb itself. This place looks like a straight path, but it's very likely that there are other mysteries. You must take care of your junior brothers and sisters, don't let them get lost. Rest assured, Wanyu is presiding over the mountain chain array, so she won't easily get lost. Wanyun said and then frowned. But the strange thing is, that Zhu Shiyao disappeared without a trace as if she was sent to another place by the sword catacomb. However, the other people have been following behind us like maggots on a tarsal bone. This is also a good thing. It shows that they have no way to keep up with Zhu Shiyao. Those people from Lingjian school are very interesting, they don't seem to be that united. Halfway through his words, Jianglu shook his head and no longer thought about it. Forget it, now is not the time to think about this. I feel that the passage is about to end, let everyone get ready. At the same time, Wang Lu, who followed the Xingjing sect team into the 4th level, was also confused. Little Bai, can you still smell Big Sister's scent? No, she's no longer in this level. Bai Shixian, who was walking side by side with Wang Lu, wrinkled her nose and then gently shook her head. As an immortal beast, Bai Shixian naturally had a keen sense of smell that was superior to any human. Coupled with her pure yin constitution, her perception even surpassed that of a Yuanying stage cultivator. If she said no, then she must be gone. Hee, 1,000 skills is really not as good as a plug-in. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Big Sister is indeed Big Sister. Senior brother, has Big Sister found the treasure? Luli curiously asked. Then can we go back? There's a smell here that makes me very uncomfortable. The stale air from 10,000 years ago, of course it's uncomfortable. However, it's not to the extent of stopping. Big Sister has her immortal fate, but our immortal fate path has not been cut off. Otherwise, there's no need for the sword catacomb to design this endless passage and continue to maintain the trial level. This sword catacomb is the relic of a true immortal, so no one can monopolize it. She can take it and we can explore it. Lu Li was somewhat disappointed, but since Wang Lu said so, she had no objection. Senior brother, I smell a different smell, the passage should be coming to an end. A moment later, the Xingjing sect team in the front suddenly accelerated, apparently also aware of the change. After about a cup of tea time, the passage suddenly opened up, and in front of them was a bright sunshine. Walking out of the dark and narrow passageway, the first thing that came into view was a majestic mountain range. The exit of the passageway was set at the peak of a towering mountain. The top of the mountain was a flat open space. The area was abnormally vast, just like a plane. This magical ability of space transformation is really amazing, worthy to be an immortal technique. Looking at the vast and boundless space, the big brother of the 10,000 Arts sect, Zhan Zai, sincerely sighed with emotion. As an academic cultivator, he was very clear about the astonishing amount of magical power needed to open up such a place in the sword catacomb. Although it was normal for a decent sect to open up an immortal cave in their sect, the space was rarely this vast. And this was just one of the trials designed by the sword catacomb to select its successor. However, for the other people, the issue that was worth paying attention to was obviously not the immortal technique of the immortal from ancient times. How could they continue the fourth trial? What kind of clues were hidden in this mountain range? How should they deal with the relationship with the other sects in the process of conquering this place? Because of Zhu Shiyao's soul-stirring sword strike, the original stalemate situation was broken. The people of the four sects simultaneously entered the fourth trial of the ancient sword catacomb, vaguely forming an alliance. However, everyone knew that sincere cooperation was absolutely a fantasy. Just as everyone was immersed in their own thoughts, a strange voice suddenly rang out in everyone's mind. #yen% at #yen. What? Most of the cultivators of the four sects looked at each other in blank dismay, but there were also a few people who seemed to be thinking about something. This is an ancient language that was once popular in the Age of Chaos before the Age of Chaos. The one who first revealed the riddle was Hai Yunfan of the 10,000 Arts sect. The cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect were good at academics, and the elites of the sects who came to the sword catacomb also had their own strong points. Among them, Hai Yunfan was quite knowledgeable in the ancient language. What I heard was, defeat the guardian and enter the next trial. A moment later, Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect nodded and said, what I heard is the same. As the most ancient sect in the Wanxian League, Kunlun sect also had a deep understanding of ancient things. Most of their disciples were experts in ancient knowledge. Yes, the content is indeed like that, probably not wrong. This time, Xingjing sect sent their elite team, among which there were also talents who understood the ancient language. While the other three sects were exchanging their experience, Wang Lu also tried his best to recall what he had learned. According to the relevant records in the 10,000 Strange Tales of the 9 regions, this is the common language that spread in most of the southern parts of the 9 regions before the Age of Chaos. However, judging from the pronunciation, it should have spread 11,000 years ago in the Jianma mountain area of the Baili region, which is today's local dialect variant of the southern region. In the book Baili's Ascension to Heaven, it recorded the true immortals who came from the Baili region. Before the Age of Chaos, it was rumored that there were 3 true immortals: 100 Eyes Supreme, Flame River Supreme, and Purple Yuan Supreme. Among them, 100 Eyes Supreme was alone, so it doesn't seem like he would leave behind a legacy for future generations. As for whether it's the other 2 true immortals, further research is needed. However, it can provide people with materials for speculation. While thinking, he observed the indifferent exchange between the other 3 sections. However, Wang Lu actually found it funny. Although he was nicknamed the top student of Spirit Sword Sect, he didn't dare to claim that he had top-notch knowledge. Especially now that the elites of the 5 uniques had gathered, no one dared to say that he could beat the others. The attainments of the disciples of the other 3 sects in the ancient language should not be below him, but now they pretended to understand and exchange with each other, which was really ridiculous. They were all old guns, so why would they pretend to be young? It was nothing more than feeling that the atmosphere here was strange. Plus, since the 4 sects had already coexisted, they had the intention to further cooperate. Using the academic exchange as a prelude, they began to have a dialogue between the teams. However, this was also good, at least it was better than fighting each other as soon as they arrived. The ancient sword tomb of the true immortal level, even a professional adventurer would find it difficult to solo, unless it was a lifetime cheat like Big Sister. Having several piles of cannon fodder around was absolutely useful. At this time, the people of the other three sects had just finished the foreplay and began to exchange the real valuable topic. They then heard Power King Jianglu ask, "So, who exactly is this voice?" Zhou Mumu said, "In the ancient era, most of the time, there will be a guardian similar to the spirit of the tool to guide the later generation to complete the inheritance. It's just that, perhaps because it's been too long, this guardian has lost its spirituality. Just now, I tried several methods to call it, but the response I got was the same sentence." Hai Yunfan said, "It's a non-intelligent character. But his hint is not wrong, we have to defeat the guardian to enter the next level." Jianglu agreed. Although this world is vast, it's completely lifeless and there's no clue to the next level. It's just that, who exactly is the guardian that it mentioned? Zhou Mumu also said awkwardly, "There's no clue at all. Moreover, it's strange that although this mountain is vast, there's not even the slightest breath of life. Even the vegetation is very sparse. As for the guardian, I can't see it at all." "How could you not see it?" Wang Lu's timely interjection successfully attracted everyone's attention. Jianglu earnestly asked, "Did you find it?" Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed forward. Among the rolling mountains, a towering mountain was particularly eye-catching. Looking from afar, the peak of the mountain went straight into the clouds, and the huge mountain shrouded the entire lake in its shadow. Even from a distance they could feel an astonishing sense of oppression. "Isn't that it?" Following the guidance of Wang Lu, Zhou Mumu and the others carefully observed the mountain. Although they couldn't find any spirituality, but it was true that the shape of the mountain was vaguely humanoid. Power King Jianglu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. "It can't be, right?" Wang Lu sneered. "What are you afraid of? It's just a mere 10,000 feet level trash." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.